On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Will from Exploding Helicopters back on, and we are doing another Nepo Babies episode. This time we're doing some classic Hollywood Nepo Babies. So we've got David Carradine, who's in Future Zone. So his dad's John Carradine. And then we've got Peter Fonda, who's in South Beach, the Fred Williamson film. Obviously, his dad's Henry Fonda. So I think they were both in The Grapes of Wrath together, John Carradine and Henry Fonda, not Peter Fonda and David Carradine, but either way. But yeah, so stay tuned for that. So some interesting movies there, but also a fun conversation talking about sort of those actors, the golden age of Hollywood actors versus their sons who were acting in the biz as well. So stay tuned for that. And then next week, Ty from Co-Opus is on for his monthly spot as we look at The Wide West and Tin Soldier. So an interesting combination there. We had another movie in mind to pair with Tin Soldier, and it turned out that the only version available on free streamers was the Spanish language version. So we had to scrap that one. We needed a last minute fill in, and Wide West, it was on Shumo or Zumo, however you pronounce that. We'd seen the other two Western movies that Alexander Nevsky did, so we thought, okay, why don't we do Wide West? So that'll be interesting. That'll be next week, so stay tuned for that next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, John Cross from After Movie Diner is back on. We're going to look at a couple more erotic thrillers. We're going to do a couple Shannon Tweed ones. We'll be looking at Scorned and Victim of Desire, so that'll be in 2 weeks' time. And then in terms of things like the YouTube channel and DTVC Extra, I don't really have a lot in store for either of those. But, again, we'll see if something comes up. Right now, I'm kind of in manic novel writing mode. So really anything outside of podcasts and, like the main podcast and reviews, anything outside of those two things, I'm having trouble doing anything beyond that. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll have this novel, The Rough Draft, in the can, and then we'll be on. I'm about 76,000 words right now, so if I can get to 100,000, that's probably about where I want to land this thing, but we'll see. It may finish itself in less than that, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, so that's that. So for right now, nothing on the DTVC Extra or the YouTube channel front. But the old videos are still there. Now, speaking of videos, my plan was to put the King of the Kickboxers one up on the Substack, like I did with the Hard Justice one. The thing is, I forgot. It was a really long one, and it has like the opening and closing that I do with those. And even that opening, even for my standards, it was a little meandering. So I was thinking about trying to cut some of that. So of course, when you're cutting things out, right, that means editing. And so doing extra editing is going to take time. So we'll see. I was thinking about maybe cutting it into two videos, because there's the one clip that I do of Lauren Avedon and Jerry Trimble, right? That opening scene in King of the Kickboxers, and then the end fight between Avedon and Billy Blanks. So maybe I'll cut it into two videos and post those both on the Substack. But the Substack is still there. If you want to subscribe, again, it's a good way to keep up with what's happening on the DTV Connoisseur. Because I post everything there. So if you don't want to, if you don't want to be on social media, I get it. Social media is not always a great place. I like Instagram, just my own personal thing. I like that I can go on there and see a lot of great cat content, a lot of cat videos, other animal videos as well. There's a pig sanctuary in Virginia that I follow. I'm always a fan of saving animals, and so pig content is great too. So animal content is fantastic on Instagram. So sometimes within the animal content, I'll see like, oh, Bulletproof posted something, or PM Entertainment or something like that, or DTV Digest has a new episode up. So Instagram's mine, but hey, whatever one you dig, you can still catch us on the socials. But if you're tired of social media, follow on Substack. You'll get an email in your email account when we post something new, and then you can go check it out that way as well. Now, as far as the site, this past weekend, we posted our PM Entertainment movie for the month of March. We did Intent to Kill with Tracy Lords, Yaphet Kotto, and Scott Patterson, directed by Charles Kanganis. In terms of the stunt work on that one, is Scott McAvoy as the second unit director, and then we had the stunt coordinating duo of Red Horton and Broadway Joe Murphy. I can't remember. I think it was Red Horton was the stunt coordinator on that one, but fun PM one. It's available on Fossum, but also it is on the YouTube. They have a YouTube version of it. My YouTube channel has a PM Entertainment playlist, so you can go in there and see, and it is included on that, so you check that out. But that was a really fun one to watch. If you haven't seen Intent to Kill yet, definitely check that out. This weekend, I was thinking about doing Scorned. The only thing is, Scorned, I haven't. That's going to be on the upcoming episode that I do with John from After We Were Down Here, PM Entertainment Podcast. And that episode won't be coming out for a couple of weeks. So I'm debating about maybe, usually I wait until after the episode comes out to do the written review. But the other thing is I've got a busy weekend coming up, and so that's a movie I've already seen, already have screen caps of it. I just have to write it. So there is a little bit of it's a little bit enticing to do that one. We'll see. So it might be Scorned. If it's not Scorned, there are a couple other ones that I'm looking at. One of them is Final Heist, written by Richard Pierce, who's been on the podcast a couple times. Also wrote Sector 4 Extraction with Olivier Gruner, but he wrote Final Heist, and so that was one I was looking at reviewing. It's a Tubi original, so that might be the one you get this week as well. So keep an eye out. We'll see as we get through the month of March. And then, as we're closing in on 6 minutes, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about my newest novel, Mark in Sales. Follows Mark, a salesperson who sells cut-rate health insurance and makes a lot of money doing it. But the thing is, he doesn't spend a lot of time with his family, and also he starts to see that the toll that the insurance that he sells takes on the employees who get stuck with it, right? As they're losing providers, as services aren't covered, they're out a lot of money, and he starts to question whether he should be selling this insurance, if it's really a good thing. And then his company offers him the promotion he's always wanted. So there's a dilemma there. But it covers issues of things like adulthood, as he's getting older and his kids are becoming teenagers and, taking care of them, growing older just in general, but also what success means. He's very good at this and he likes being successful. He likes that he's probably the best person in his state at selling this stuff. So a lot of different themes that we cover. It's people my age or, Gen Xers, Xennials, that kind of age group. So if you're into that kind of thing, definitely check that out. I think it is, the Kindle version of it is like in the top 400 of suburban literary fiction. So if you're a fan of suburban literary fiction, definitely check that out as well. If that book doesn't really do it for you, the link to my authors page is in the podcast description. You can click on that authors page and you can go, and all of my books are there. So you can pick up any of my books. They're all still available to buy. I didn't, this isn't like Disney, right? I don't vault my books when I put out new ones. They're all available. So, go pick up, you can pick up my first book, Chad in Accounting, which is in the same universe as Mark in Sales. My author cycle that I did, Girl and a Gun, Holtman Arms, or Don's House in the Mountains. And then, of course, my short novel that I wrote, Nadia and Aiden. That's another one. They're all there. Always happy if somebody wants to pick one of those up. So, but definitely the newest one is Mark in Sales. Anyway, we are past 7 minutes here, so why don't we have John from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures play in our theme song, and then when we come back, Will from Exploding Helicopter is going to be on, and we are going to be looking at South Beach and Future Zone. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined by a very special guest. We've got Will from Exploding Helicopter back on. Welcome back, Will.
Oh, thanks for allowing me to grace your august podcast once again.
Yes, and we're going back to a theme that we had before, the Nepo Babies theme. Now, when we did the last time, we did Nicolas Cage's son Weston, and then Clint Eastwood's son Scott Eastwood. This time, we're doing a little bit more older Hollywood. We're doing John Carradine's son, David Carradine, and then Henry Fonda's son, Peter Fonda, with two interesting movies. We've got, we'll start with South Beach, the Peter Fonda movie, then also Future Zone, the David Carradine one. But yeah, I guess, thinking about sort of these old Hollywood actors and their kids, sort of this version of nepotism that came in kind of in the 60s and 70s. What were some, kind of some of these actors sort of in that generation coming from old Hollywood parents.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it'd be fun to have a theme for this show, so I thought, oh, let's maybe go for older Hollywood actors, kind of the children of some sort of golden era or classic era Hollywood stars here, and I think we obviously the whole idea of Hollywood Nepo babies, as we were discussing last time, has kind of really come to the fore. But it's frankly a phenomena that is as old as Hollywood itself, and we can certainly see here in these films, and with these films that it's certainly not a new phenomena.
No, what's interesting with these two names, with Carradine and Fonda, is that as they got later in their careers, now both of them were born at the turn of the 20th century, and they both have some really great credits to their name, in that sort of that golden age of Hollywood period. It's interesting that Henry Fonda's career, it wraps up with like On Golden Pond, which is a really great way to wrap up. Whereas John Carradine, he was doing kind of direct-to-video stuff, kind of not too far off from what his son David Carradine was doing.
Yeah, I mean, John Carradine, what a sort of incredible career! Like spans all the way back to pretty much like sort of the very early 30s. I don't know if he ever made a silent film, but he certainly had credits going back to the very earliest days of the 1930s. And then, as you say, he just carried on working throughout the decades, all the way through. I mean, what did he go into the 90s? Certainly into the late 80s, didn't he? Yeah, I don't think he made it.
He had a movie. So he passed in 88, but he had a movie come out in 95 that he had started before he passed.
Perfect.
353 credits. I mean, this is like a pre Eric Roberts kind of career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's just one of those guys who just like carried on working. And, he's been in like some like classic films, some very prestigious films, but yeah, as his, I don't know, I guess the kind of as his notoriety and the luster of his career faded, he didn't see any problem in just recalibrating the types of film, recalibrating his career for whatever gigs he could get. And as you say, yeah, he just, I mean, I don't know whether I don't know what was motivating him, whether he just loved to work, or whether there was financial considerations. But yeah, he was didn't seem to have many discriminating factors when it came to doing a film.
No, it's interesting. So yeah, his first movie was 1930. It said it was uncredited, so I guess that would have been in the speaking period. A movie called Bright Lights, according to IMDb. So and I believe that is a talkie. It's actually on Tubi if you want to see it. So I didn't realize that. It's also got Noah Beery. So it's got some other names. Frank Fay, of course, father of stand-up comedy. Also father of stand-up comedy and a Nazi. So, but 1930, he hadn't quite become full Nazi yet. He was he married Barb. He kind of, I don't know if he discovered Barbara Stanwyck, but they married, and she was able to kind of have a career after him being a Nazi when they divorced. But yes. But,
wow, I mean, people's careers got completely kiboshed for a lot less than that. So she did well to navigate that.
Yes, exactly. And but yeah, I wonder, because one of the things about Peter Fonda compared to David Carradine, my understanding is I think David Carradine and John Carradine had a really great relationship. There's a sort of trivia, I think, under John Carradine on IMDb that when John Carradine passed, the Undertaker, I guess, made his face up so he had this goofy smile, and Carradine wasn't a fan of that, so he kind of repositioned his face, and then I guess gave him posthumously a shot of a whiskey or something. But it kind of sounds like the kind of thing that like a father and son having a caring bond might, even as macabre as it sounds, at least they had a good relationship. Whereas I think Peter Fonda's famous quote about his dad was something about how, like, yeah, he's always loved his dad and he wished his dad felt the same way, something along those lines. and I do wonder if it is the choices in roles that like Henry Fonda always was doing, you know, higher end stuff, whereas his son Peter, you know, I mean, you know, I don't know what was thought of Easy Rider, if that was considered, you know, I mean, I think it's considered one of AFI's top 100 movies now, but you know, the movies that Peter Fonda was doing, I don't know if, you know, he just wasn't a fan of some of that stuff. And of course, when you get to things like South Beach, you know, I mean, again, South Beach is a movie that John Carradine would have done, but Henry, you know, but Henry Fonda definitely wouldn't have.
Is there a film that John Carradine wouldn't have done? Like, I mean,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, I was looking at both of their. I mean, Henry Fonda. Just thinking about him as an actor. I mean, so many movies that he's done that are you just would look at and go, okay, yes, you know. For me, I think Grapes of Wrath is my favorite of his. But I mean, you know, obviously, you know, 12 Angry Men. I mean, it's
My Darling Clementine, classic Western.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, right? So when he gets older, he transitions into these Westerns that are all, you know, really fantastic as well. So yeah, it was quite a career with him. But you know, he never quite, I guess with the Westerns, maybe some of those were low budget, but he never really fell into, right, that kind of that really low budget area, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, he sort of transitioned into being the president or a kind of army general. Yeah, he might be taking smaller roles, but they would still be relatively prestigious productions. I don't know. Did he ever did he do any kind of you know, a lot of actors of that era kind of would go over to Italy and you know, appear in a Pulitzer Teshi or something for a bit of marketing. I don't know if he ever did any sort of random films in Italy, but for the most part, I know exactly what you mean. The roles maybe got smaller, and he'd be sort of you know, kind of popping up as a sort of general, president, or kind of some sort of high powered figure for a few scenes, and yeah, kind of, and then as you say, yeah, signed off with on Golden Pond, which because you talked about Fonda and like not getting on with Peter Fonda, but I don't think he got on with Jane Fonda either. Like it seems to have had very troubled relationships with his kids. Don't know what lies behind that. So yeah, but I'll have to do some research. But yeah, he's a long career and many good films over many decades.
Yeah, you know, I never really thought of it. That's a good point about, you know, with him with Jane Fonda as well. I wonder if he was more conservative. I mean, again, I don't have any knowledge either way on whether or not he was a more conservative person, and that's why he, you know, because obviously Jane Fonda, you know, with the Vietnam War.
Jane.
Yes, right, exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. But you know, I mean, I think of like the Grapes of Wrath, which also starred John Carradine. He was in that as well. I mean, you know, that was one of, I think, like 4 books or 4 movies that was in AFI's 100 films, 100 years, 100 films. That also was the book that it was adapted from was Modern Library's 100 books of the 20th century. And usually when that happens, right, when you get a book adaptation, there's always, you know, one or the other is usually lacking, right? Like either the movie is better than the book or the book better than the movie. And I think part of the reason why the movie was as good as the book was his performance in that film. And so, you know, and then like, you know, yeah, I again think of 12 Angry Men, similar thing, right? That's based off a story. And it's like, yeah, he's such a big part of that. That, you know, when you look at his career, when you get into like the 70s, you know, he's doing TV roles, but it's almost like it's a big deal that you have Henry Fonda on this. It's not like he's slumming it on a TV series.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, tonight, Henry Fonda guest stars on whatever, Laugh-In or something. And it was, you know, a big deal. So yeah, he always had that presence, it seems like.
Yeah, he was able to stave off some of the you know, some of the humiliations of you know, he didn't do any Roger Corman productions, or wasn't working with AIP or anything.
Right, exactly. Which I'm sure they all would have loved to have gotten him. They would have loved that. But yeah, so his son Peter Fonda is born in 1940, and Yeah, I mean, obviously, Easy Rider. That's kind of his big one, and then he kind of falls off until Yuli's Gold in 1997, which I remember that one in 1997 when that came out because he was doing the talk show circuit, and it was almost like this renaissance for him, where everybody was talking to him again and doing all that stuff. And so this movie we're going to be talking about here. South Beach is about 4 years before that, so he's still kind of knee deep in that. After that renaissance, which lasts about 10 years or so, he kind of gets back into the direct to video world. I know he did a Fred and Ray movie. He's doing kind of that kind of stuff before he passed. So he almost kind of like Mickey Rourke in that sense that he had like this brief return, but then kind of fell back into the direct to video world.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by people like that whose kind of careers sort of they have like a moment where they bubble back up, and you sort of think, oh, could this be the launch pad for them to stay at a certain kind of level of production, but then they just seem to sort of go back to what they normally where they were previously. And that, I mean, and perhaps another good example of that would be a character that we meet in, or an actor that we meet in South Beach, which is Robert Forster, who obviously was a kind of known actor in the 70s and 80s, then started going into kind of low budget productions, career resurgence with Jackie Brown. But that doesn't last very long, and he's soon back into the sort of like the DTV world. And you sort of, I don't quite, I'm sort of, and Mickey Rourke, I think another good example. Although I can see reasons why he would need to go back, because he was so. I mean, he looks. Let's be honest. I guess it'd be hard to find a film in which you can accommodate Mickey Rourke, because he's sort of, by the point of his career resurgence, he kind of looked somewhat freakish. So you can't. It's kind of tough to have him as a sort of, I don't know. You sort of need the right role to kind of explain why you've got this sort of weird looking guy in your film.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I think Robert Downey Jr. played a big part in getting him the role as the villain in Iron Man 2, which I liked his villain in that movie. I thought it was great, but I think that's probably the kind of role, right, would be a villain in a superhero movie. But of course, now those movies have kind of moved. It's interesting that when he was at his place after, The Wrestler, he would have been the name that you would get for a movie like Iron Man, which when the MCU was still kind of in its ascendancy, right? It still hadn't become what it would become. So it's almost like two ships passing in the night, right? That his work's heading back down, MCU's heading up, and they kind of meet at that one moment in 2000 and I don't know, it's 2010, I guess, to do that one role. And it is an interesting thing when you look at all of the villains in the MCU, where you think something like Kate Blanchett, who does a really great job in Thor Ragnarok, and some of these other great baddies. Tom Hiddleston, of course, made a career out of these, out of playing Loki, and I think 1/3 of all animals. 1/3 of all pets that millennials have to be named Loki. There's some rule about that whenever I'm online and I see cats or dogs, it's like, oh, here, look at Loki. Loki's doing this goofy thing. It's like, okay, great, but you know what I mean? Like, it didn't have the same bump for Rourke. It was like. It was just sort of like this moment in time for him where, and again, that movie, I guess, didn't do as well. I mean, there are parts about that movie that didn't age well anyway. I mean, Elon Musk being that also doesn't, it's just yeah. So, but
it's the Home Alone, is it Home Alone? That's all Home Alone 2 cameo equivalent.
Exactly. Yes, yeah. I always love that the Canadian TV version of Home Alone 2, in editing for time, they edit out Donald Trump. They've always edited out Donald Trump because it's a cameo that doesn't affect the rest of the movie, right? It's just there. So when
that explains so much about relations between America and Canada now.
Exactly. I remember it was this huge controversy in Trump's first term that like, oh, Canada cut out Trump. And it's like, well, no, they've always cut out Trump because it's like the place that you cut it out to fit it in to the TV slot. But it became this huge thing, which, to your point, it actually very well could be with how Trump is.
It's not impossible, is it? Which is both alarming and thoroughly dispiriting.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's it's interesting. I don't know. I've never seen Iron Man 2 on TV, but I wonder if again, because Elon Musk cutting him out would be the thing, because again, it doesn't affect the rest of the story. It's just here's our fake movie billionaire with a real billionaire, and so the one thing that is interesting, I think, that we're seeing with billionaires now that and John Cross always talks about this too, that like billionaires used to be the villains in movies, right? And so it's like, that was you always wanted the billionaire, and so the fact that Iron Man changed it with Robert Downey Jr. being a billionaire hero, I wonder if we're moving back in the other direction now, that we're going to have more billionaire villains, and sort of get away from that.
I think I think we're well on course for a return of the billionaire villain.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this movie that we're talking about here, South Beach, it's one that I reviewed in the past. I actually discovered that IMDb didn't have the link to my review. I had to manually add it, so hopefully it'll be there. But I was doing it, of course, because it was a Fred Williamson directed, starring vehicle, and it is really his vehicle. I don't know, because I've seen a lot of Seagal movies, and I know you just recently, as we're recording this, you just released the Exploding Helicopter episode on Half Past Dead. But I didn't realize before how much of a Seagal-ish kind of thing that Fred Williamson does, where it's like every woman is throwing herself at him in this movie. And pretty much all of the women, except for like one, are a good 15 to 20 years younger than him. But it does have enough Fonda in it, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what were your thoughts on South Beach?
I found South Beach, a rough watch, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've really struggled actually to. I mean, I hope you're not going to start grilling me on detail on what happened in this film, because it went into my eyeballs and has disappeared out the back of my brain somewhere, because it's so it doesn't really reward your attention.
No.
And my mind was wandering throughout this film. I think fundamentally there's just too much stuff going on in this film, and we kind of start with this idea of this murder plot where you've got this kind of psycho. He's obsessed with this telephone sex worker who's linked to Fred Williamson. So it kind of, there's the premise of a movie, a very 1993 movie premise right there. But then this film throws in all this other stuff. And I was sort of making a few notes, ahead of this recording. And I was like, did the whole murder thing, did that ever get resolved in the film? I don't recall that it did. Maybe it did, but I mean, I think that just speaks to the fact that this film is just so random, so episodic, and so unengaging that I can sort of finish watching the film and then start wondering, like, did that major plot that was set up at the beginning, did that ever have a conclusion? I mean, yeah, did it have a conclusion, Matt? Help me out here.
Kind of. So the funny thing, so to give people an idea, like I was going to try to do a synopsis and realize that I can't, because if I do a synopsis of the movie, it would take a good like 30 minutes to cover all the disparate plot points that come up in the film. And so it to your point, the basic premise is that Fred Williamson is a private detective, and his ex-wife Vanity is being stalked by somebody, and her coworker at this phone sex place that they work at, her coworker gets killed, and so he's supposed to be protecting her. At the same time, he's being set up by somebody. And it could be that they're the same people. We don't know. And if they are, what their motives are, we don't know. So at the same time that he's being set up, he's also trying to solve this situation. And he and Peter Fonda, who's his buddy, they played football together, which one of the funny things is Fred Williamson was a decent defensive back in the NFL. But his claim to fame in the NFL was at Super Bowl I. He talked about how he was going to lay the hammer. It's his move that he did where he would like kind of like clothesline people. He was going to lay the hammer on the Green Bay Packers. He actually got knocked out by a Packers player in the first quarter and didn't play the rest of the game. So that's his claim to fame, which of course he sets his character up as one of the best defensive backs of all time. So it's a little different. But anyway,
hey, it's a Fred Williamson film. What else are you going to do?
Exactly. And so, but yeah, it's like these two disparate plots of him being set up, the girlfriend being harassed and stalked, maybe a murderer, maybe not a murderer, because to your point, the murderer disappears midway through the film and it becomes this other thing. And to your point, so getting back to your question about does the murder get resolved, I think so, but I'm not sure because so one of the things is they obscure the killer's face the whole time, right? Like they show him from the neck down, and we just hear his voice. And there was usually when a movie sets that kind of thing up, it's because one of the main characters is going to be revealed to be the killer. And
Yeah.
as we're getting to the end, and I couldn't remember because it'd been a while since I'd seen this. I think it's been about 15 years or so since I'd last seen it. So I was like trying to remember if they were setting it up that maybe Gary Busey's character was the killer because he disappears and comes back. And I thought that could be, but I was like, no, it would be just like Fred Williamson to have it just be another like B-list or D-list actor that he knows that he was going to cast in this part. That's who it's revealed. Sure enough, it's Sam Jones. It's just, oh, by the way, Sam Jones is in this movie. He's the killer. And so I guess that part is resolved, even though he kills Vanity, which, again, the whole point of Fred Williamson's character is he's supposed to protect Vanity, and he fails at that. And it's like, well, what are his stakes? What is his motivation if he loses? So that's part of it. But then we find out that Gary Busey's character was the one making the phone calls, and it was like, but the way they set it up throughout the movie is that the killer was making the phone calls, like they were the same person. So why is it now suddenly that Gary Busey was making the phone calls, but he also wasn't involved with the murders? It didn't make any sense.
It really didn't. And Matt, I salute you for sort of walking through so many plot points there, because I would really struggle to do the same thing. And I mean, so many things, as you say, so many things. Those plots come and go, as do characters come and go, because sort of Gary Busey like drops out of the film for a good chunk of it, and then he just sort of randomly reappears at another moment, and you sort of like, okay, what is going on here? I mean, I don't know if that is a product of well, who knows what that's a product of? Was that a product of the fact that Gary Busey was kind of fitting this in around some other gig, and he's just doing a few days here and there? Was there how much was there really a fully written script when they were making this film, and it's kind of being put together on the fly? I don't know. There's some bits do feel like they're being kind of workshopped on screen. There's that whole bit with like Fred Williamson and Peter Fonda kind of goofing around, like reenacting some of their football days, and that kind of has the feel of something that was made up on the day on the set. Maybe it wasn't. Who knows? But yeah, it just having this problem. This film has a lot of flaws. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but it wasn't kind of a complete chore to watch, because there are like brief moments within the film that you sort of like I enjoy. So you get kind of like a pair of I mean, I was frustrated. Look, let's talk about things I enjoyed. I enjoyed the idea of Fred Williamson and Gary Busey as like a private detective double act, as a kind of buddy cop movie. Like if they'd if that had been like the center of the film, Busey and Williamson together as like private detectives trying to figure out what the hell's going on with these phone sex murders or whatever. Brilliant. There's a great scene at the beginning where maybe goes on a little bit too long, where they're kind of goofing around on a golf course, and there's some other scenes where they're interacting together, and those Busey. This is kind of classic era Busey. Fred Williamson's got a larger than life persona, very easygoing, very relaxed, but very charismatic, and like really enjoyed those scenes. Then we get the Fred Williamson Peter Fonda sort of double act movie, and you could like, maybe you could do a buddy cop movie with these two guys, with Williamson calling in his old football buddy to kind of help him out because he's being framed for these murders or whatever. And then they do briefly all three come together, but I think that's only for like a brief moment. It just so those moments are kind of enjoyable, but they are just sort of moments. They disappear and they don't add up to anything, and the kind of the incoherence sort of takes over. And so we haven't talked about the other fact that this cast is absolutely stacked, and that does paper over some of the cracks in this film. That you've got, as we've talked about, Busey, Williamson, got Peter Fonda, you've got Robert Forster here as a kind of cop buddy of Fred Williamson, you've got Sam Jones turning up for a little bit. Henry Silva also pops up. So, you've got like just when your sort of interest is sort of flagging, your attention is wandering, you do get some famous face cropping up, and that kind of like, oh, okay, I'll pay attention to now to this scene. But yeah, when you do pay attention, it's not often rewarded.
No, you make a great point about the names because when I looked back at my old review of it, it was essentially that same thing. Only I think the names papering over the cracks was a bigger deal for me then. I was like, oh, I like seeing these names. I like seeing all these people in this movie. But I think part of the reason for that is that I wasn't paying as much attention probably to the plot back then as I did this time, where I was just like, what is happening? What are we doing? I think I was expecting certain things. To your point about the plot, I think, or to your point about the characters, this is one of Williamson's Po' Boy productions, and he had kind of pioneered what is now kind of the modern direct-to-video approach to filmmaking, which is get a bunch of names on board for your film, and then sell it to companies that will give you the money based off of those names. And so he would take movies that weren't even completed to Cannes and just say, hey, I've got X, Y, and Z. How much money can you give me? And people would line up and say, and he even joked about it. He's like, I got, I would make a poster for something and get money for it based off the poster. So I think, as we were talking about the plot, like not being fully fleshed out or fully created, I do wonder if, okay, I'm going to make a movie in Miami. That's going to be enough to get, hey, Peter Fonda, you want to spend 2 weeks in Miami, fully paid? Great. Busey, whoever, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to spend a vacation in Miami and just shoot for a couple days here or there? So he gets that set up, goes to Cannes, gets the money. It said the budget was $800,000, which I know, we know IMDb budgets. You never know what those are. But he gets the money, and he's like, okay, now we've got to actually make a movie. And I wonder if there was just a sense of like, okay, yeah, this happens here, okay. And maybe when he got to the end of it, it's like, I don't know if I've got an actual movie here, but I got to put something together.
I do wonder if there is an aspect of this film being kind of put together in chunks, that it wasn't sort of necessarily we have a finished script and they shot from X date to Y date, because I don't know if you noticed it as well, but I'm convinced that Peter Fonda has a kind of what looks to me like a natural moustache at the beginning of this film, and then at the end it's suddenly much bushier and blatantly looks like it's attacked, like it's stuck onto his top lip. So it kind of, that started to make me think that Peter Fonda was kind of shot some scenes at some point, went off, I don't know, did something else, or thought he'd finished doing this film, and then suddenly Fred Williamson like, oh, can you come back? I need another 20 minutes, and we're gonna do some we're gonna improv a scene in a bar where we relive our football days or something. And and wardrobe just I haven't got time. He hasn't got time to grow a moustache, so wardrobe just tacks one onto his top lip, and they go with that. So that made me wonder if some of the episodic nature of this film was that it was kind of perhaps just shot in chunks, and it was, sort of something that was sort of stitched together from various bits of filming that Fred Williamson did, and just kind of knitted these seemingly random plots together into something that vaguely resembles a kind of coherent film.
No, you make a great point. So, I was looking at what he's done, what he did around this time. Now, he did the movie Deadfall, which I haven't seen before, but it's kind of a, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to say a vanity piece, but it's sort of like this project that a bunch of, like Nicolas Cage and a bunch of other actors around that age, Michael Biehn, they all kind of did. It was directed by Christopher Coppola. So, so obviously it was like, I think he got all of his another Nepo baby as we're talking here, but got, a bunch of his, the people that he knew to make a movie with him. And I don't know, I don't see any pictures of Peter Fonda in it, but that could be one movie. But also he did a couple episodes of In the Heat of the Night, which, would have been a big TV show at that time. And I wonder if okay, so in the heat of the night was like, well, we don't want you having a mustache in this role. And of course, if you're going to get on network TV, because again, I think for someone like him who was kind of slumming it in the DTV world, if he can get in on a network TV show at that time, that might get him on somebody's radar.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, he was doing some other stuff too, I guess, at that time, but I do wonder if it was like, okay, get rid of the mustache. But then, yeah, like you said, Fred Williamson comes back. It's like, hey, I need you to do some more scenes for me. Because, looking at when this movie comes out, it's in '93. But, I mean, another part of this, to your point, was Gary Busey's hair looks a little different in different scenes. And so I do wonder, like, he could have been piecemeal getting funding. It could have been multiple cons that he could have been getting money for this movie.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that equally could be another bit that they kind of got some money together, shot some stuff, then they closed down the production because Fred's got to go and dig up some more money from somewhere, and then once he gets a few checks in his pocket, he can kind of pick up filming again, and maybe that maybe explains why sort of say Busey sort of disappears out of the film for a bit, because maybe he wasn't available, and so like Fred's got the money, he's got to shoot, so it's okay, well, we just won't have Gary Busey in these kind of that's why he sort of randomly drops out of the story for a bit, because he's off doing something else, and but Fred's got to shoot anyway, and as you say, when they are able to get him back, Busey's had his hair cut, and so it looks nothing kind of like ends up ultimately matching.
Yeah, because like I think the idea is supposed to be this whole idea about Busey being the one doing the phone, making the phone calls, even though Sam Jones's character is the killer. I mean, Sam Jones has a complete buzz cut, so whenever they show the person on the phone, they would show the back of their head, and the hair was a little bit longer, which is what made me think it was Busey. Except I'm seeing Busey, and his hair is not that long either in a lot of the scenes, and so yeah, what it does, to your point, is that we get this plot that's, I mean, it's so all over the place that I think when we get to that last, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of the movie, I was like, okay, it's probably good to put on some goggles because the loose ends are going to be flying everywhere. You need some eye protection to cover those. But actually, they don't really. The loose ends don't fly together. They kind of stay loose ends in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd probably just written themselves into a corner. There'd just be like no sensible way of tying all these things up. So I think they probably just thought, you know what, let's not worry too much about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a fascinating thing because we think of the direct to video world today, and I know, like, Ty and I do a lot of new direct to video movies that are kind of more direct, straight to streaming kind of deals, where the budgets are very slim. I mean, if this really was $800,000. And again, it probably makes more sense that he got this 8,000 on multiple trips to Cannes or multiple trips to Italy to get his funding. But the modern movie today, it's like if they get $1 million or $2 million and they spend most of that budget on the actors, it's everything else is just like they would definitely not shoot in Miami. They'd shoot in Puerto Rico and call it Miami or something like that. But it is interesting how his approach is being used so much today, where it's just, get a bunch of names, go to something like Bondit Media or whatever other company that will fund it, say, here are the names we got, this is what we think we can shoot it for, and then just pull it off. And if the story works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But hey, it's kind of a crass thing. Oh, I've clicked on the thumbnail already and watched 15 minutes. That's a good enough for Tubi to get some ads in or something.
I know, it's kind of depressing though, isn't it? Like, that is the, like, let's just get some names, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because we've all still got paid. I kind of find that a bit depressing as somebody who is sitting there watching some of these god awful films.
Right. Well, because one of the things that a lot of them have is, but the action ones in particular, they have cheaply made exploding helicopters. Because I guess they feel like they've got to do that in them. So yeah, I can imagine you've seen it probably about as many as I have.
Yeah, I really, there's some films I've been having to watch in the last few years, which I just really have resented watching because it just sort of, they've just been so, just you can't see anybody. There's no love, there's no care, there's no ideas. There's just like, we're just making some content here, and you don't, no, I have no idea what the motivations are. There's certainly certainly not anything to do with creating something that anybody wants to watch.
No, and looking at it from this movie with South Beach, there's almost like this like I don't want to say admiration, but there's almost like a kind of like a endearing quality, like, oh, Fred Williamson, he's kind of doing this gonzo approach to filmmaking, and he's getting something done despite the odds, and that's kind of not what we're seeing today. Now it's this kind of this Randall Emmett, Emmett Furlow Oasis, like, I don't know, assembly line approach to making movies that is just so cynical that at least with South Beach you could say, okay, there isn't a cynicism to it that like these modern ones have.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Like that is the key thing is as you say, South Beach, deeply flawed film. It's not a good film, but I don't think I think everyone involved is trying to, mostly for the most part, everyone involved is trying to make this film as good as it can be. Now, the fact that the ideas behind it maybe aren't that great, well, that's a different question. As you were saying, like some of these, the kind of Randall Emmett type films, I think even like some of the output of the like the Asylum has really they've put out some like watchable films that have like ideas and have like some imagination put into them, despite the fact they're working with low budget. But equally, I think in recent years, like some of their output is now just like that worst type of cynicism, a cynical kind of filmmaking of like, okay, we got to put something together that's 85 minutes and it's just absolutely going through the motions. There's just no imagination. There's the absolute minimum of effort of kind of like, just like get this to a sort of minimum technical standard, and that is that's good enough. And you're just like, well, what are we doing here? Like, who are they making that for? Like, if they're making it for TV channels to kind of like put out, are they really looking at this and thinking, yeah, this is good, we want to put this out? I mean, just do you find it kind of depressing when I'm having to sit down and watch one of those type of movies just because I have this pointless, irrational goal to watch every film with an exploding helicopter?
Yes. To that point, and I'll get back to the Asylum in a second, because I do want to touch on this point about having to watch them, because I've had people tell me, don't watch Fat Slags. It's a movie that has Dolph Lundgren, and they're like, don't watch it, stay away from it. I know Steve Dunn is one that you might see on the comments sometimes on Dolph movies. He's like, Matt, please don't watch Fat Slags. But it's like, I have to. It's a Dolph movie. I've got to watch them all. So I'm going to have to watch that. So I completely get it that you have to watch these movies if they've got exploding helicopters in them.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our cross to bear. Mine is films with exploding helicopters. Yours is Dolph Lundgren. Luckily for you, Dolph Lundgren's only made like 70, 80 movies, whereas there are like nearly 1,000 films with exploding helicopters. So in the words of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I chose poorly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm at a paltry but getting better now 24% of your exploding helicopter list. So I'm creeping up there. I'm hoping by the end of the year, if I can get to 30% by the end of the year, it's going to be tough. But I'm gonna, I'm gonna try to get more exploding helicopters, because I do feel like I should have watched more movies with exploding helicopters.
Matt, I find that number inexplicable. Inexplicable. Like, obviously, I've been making a point of watching these films,
right?
But there's a huge overlap in our areas of taste, and I just would have thought that would just by not just by dint of accident, you'd have watched much closer to sort of 30 or maybe 40, even 40% already. I mean, I find it baffling.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the fact that like a lot of them are movies like this one we're talking about here, South Beach, or the one we talking about next, Future Zone, where they just didn't bother with the exploding helicopter. And it's one of the areas I probably need to get. I'm going to try to get more into is the Italian low budget ones. I used to do a good amount of them when I first started the site, and I've kind of gotten away from them recently. And a lot of those, like Antonio Margheriti or Bruno Mattei or Mattei, they did more. They would make sure they get an exploding helicopter in somewhere. They like to show off their model work, and so it's like, hey, I built this beautiful model helicopter. Why did I blow it up? So I need to get into some more of those. I think that'll get the number up a little bit more.
I think anything you can do, Matt, to get these numbers up.
Yes. Now back on that asylum point, because I think you make a great point there. That when the asylum first started out, when they were doing what they called the mockbusters, where they would at that time you had the Blockbuster shelves, and Blockbuster at that time, Blockbuster video stores, or the corporate video stores, they would have a ton of copies of the newest movie, and if you could slip in your movie next to it, people might rent it accidentally. And that was, they got a lot of bump with War of the Worlds. I think that was their big one. And so they started doing that more often. But the thing about those movies was they let new emerging directors and actors try their hands at making movies. So it wasn't about, yes, you get like C. Thomas Howell or a name like that, but even then it was like C. Thomas Howell being able to direct or maybe write the script and that kind of thing. So there was a sense with those movies, there was an earnestness with those movies because you had people involved who were trying to make a name for themselves, trying to make it in the business. And I always appreciated that. And then, they got to that level where they were making the movies for Sci-Fi Channel. And I think they were putting more names in. They became more self-aware and tongue-in-cheek, which I think started to hurt the brand a little bit. But then I don't even know how much those movies are on the Sci-Fi Channel anymore, because I don't know how much that channel is showing movies or anything. That it seems like they're showing more of the same big movies, So now it's like the only place that they've got to put their movies is on streaming sites. And it does seem like it's like, what kind of crass animal versus animal thing can we put on there? And we got to make it for as cheap as possible. Let's just get it out there and get people to stream it, which I think it's kind of disappointing, because I think even, when we talked about Bigfoot on your podcast, there was an earnestness in that movie. There was a fun quality to that movie that the modern ones don't have.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Like there was a kind of concept, there was an idea behind Bigfoot, and you had some, fun casting. It was humorous. It was tongue in cheek, which I think is okay, because these are not, these are such well-worn tropes that the film's working with, that I think that if you assume that the audience, I think you can kind of lean a bit more into the comedy there, and I think that's completely fine and acceptable. But yeah, I can only put it down to, like, maybe I can only think that it must be something like money related, that those kind of days that there was maybe, they would get more money, so they could kind of spend more time writing the script, more time on kind of shooting the film. Whereas I'm wondering now, like some of the kind of like asylum films that I've sort of seen recently, where you just like, the cast, it's almost as if the cast have not done anything. They didn't do anything before, and they haven't done anything since. And it's almost like, okay, that they just they've just been sort of getting people who kind of like want to be in a film together, and they're sticking them in a movie, and because that's a way of keeping the costs down. And that's where I kind of feel like there's just a sort of absolute, there's been a few sort of things I've seen online where, kind of, there almost, it sounds like they're exploiting people, certainly on the sort of production side, where they're kind of like, people get like the opportunity to work on a film, but they're not really getting paid, because, and those, whether anybody gets a valuable experience out of it is, ultimately they don't give a flying monkeys. They just wanted somebody to, kind of record the sound. They've got the sound recorded and they've made their film, and that poor sod's, future development is not their concern.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I remember, there's the documentary that Hulu has kind of buried, because I think they have a deal with Randall Emmett where they show a lot of his movies, so they've kind of buried their documentary on him. But it's called, Randall Scandal, and it covers him as a producer. And people that have worked on his films, they talked about things like how, crew would be sleeping 4 to a room in places. Bruce Willis, again, with his health issues towards the end, it was essentially like Bela Lugosi, in Ed Wood movies, where they would just put him in a scene and just see what they can get out of it. And then, the issue was that Randall Emmett was kind of abusive towards it, but, Bruce Willis didn't really know what was going on, but it was, kind of a boring scene. But it's like, yeah, for the cast and crew of those things, or I should say the below the line cast and crew, right? So if you're, one of the big names, you get your money up front probably. But if you're a supporting cast member, it's like, yeah, when is that check coming? And, they don't always care. One of the things I heard with, Jesse V. Johnson has a new one, Thieves Highway, that was like really big on that. The whole below the line cast and crew weren't paid initially. Now he said in an interview that, it wasn't something on his end, right? He didn't have anything to do with that, but that he was told by the money people was, if you get the movie out there and it starts making money, we can pay everybody. And I feel like that's kind of I don't know, catch-22 for us as fans, because it's like we should be boycotting movies like that, because we should be, sending a message to these companies that you should be paying your help. It's kind of like if, here in America, people are boycotting Starbucks, and it's like this idea of like, well, if I go to Starbucks more, they'll pay their workers more. Like, I don't know if that's how that works.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical that's how capitalism works. But yeah, I mean, look, people should be paid for their labor, and whether they get paid shouldn't be dependent on whether a film actually starts making money or not. And I wouldn't go to work if somebody wasn't going to pay me. So yeah, I think I hadn't heard that about Thieves Highway. Not a film I've watched yet, and yeah, it sounds like I might avoid it, because yeah, I can't sign up to those types of ethics of filmmaking.
No, I mean, he said in an interview that 75% of the cast and crew have been paid, which, again, I don't know what that means. Like, why can't?
What about the other 25%?
Exactly.
75%. That doesn't make the other rest of it all right.
No,
Fuck.
No, and this idea that, like, well, to get the other 75% paid, you need to rent the movie. Again, I just feel like that's not. That for us as the audience, we should be, like, again, I think originally I was going to have an embargo on Jesse B. Johnson movies as well, because I was going to be like, okay, if this is what's happening, but, at least in the interview where he kind of distanced himself from the producers, and, they were the ones responsible, and he didn't want that to happen for his cast and crew. And he's talked about, I guess, that happening in other productions where it's like, getting people paid seems to be an issue with these movies. But, on the other hand, I think the movie itself, it's like, okay, yeah, until everybody gets paid, and find the money somewhere. I mean, somehow, I don't know if people didn't get paid from this movie. We're talking about South Beach, but it feels like Fred Williamson made sure people got paid.
Hope. You hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
I have no idea.
Right? No. And also, kind of as we're wrapping up this conversation, I think going back to the Asylum, I did do a quick check on Sci-Fi Channel, what they're airing today here in the United States, and it's 2 Sharknado movies. So I don't know if Asylum makes money off of those. I imagine they probably do. And then it's like, big budget movies like Zombieland, Gremlins, and then it's NCIS reruns, because they're a Paramount channel, they're just showing NCIS. So it's like there really isn't a market. I can't imagine that Sci-Fi is going to Asylum and saying like, yeah, we need more, monster versus monster movies like they did 10 years ago. So it's like another revenue stream it's dried up for the Asylum. So it's really just the streaming world, and I don't know how much money there is in that. And again, it's about tricking us into clicks, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think the money in that streaming world, I mean, you'd be like be things like sort of Tubi, so it'd be very sort of ad dependent. So you sort of, they would want to be buying your finished product, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be kind of giving you money necessarily up front unless you had some real. I mean, Tubi does have its own originals. But yeah, so they're not really going to be giving out a load of money up front to a load of filmmakers. So I think that's probably what is, creating this situation which you were just describing about with like Thieves Highway, where people are not, are not getting paid, and if they do get paid, it's dependent on whether the film actually makes some cash at some point down the line. So yeah, I think the kind of current economics of the film business are well, that it's a bigger discussion. There's all manner of issues with even with every level, I think, of the kind of film business at the moment, with due to the economics. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to be certainly at this kind of like this lower end of the tier. It does seem to be creating an awful lot of problems, and as a result, sort of dodgy practices.
Yeah, dodgy practices and just products that are coming out that are just not, I mean, even with this movie we're talking about here with South Beach, like there's things you can glom onto, but you watch some of those, those Randall Emmett ones or whatever, and Ty and I will talk about those on the podcast, and it's just like, yeah, this was an hour and a half slog. And it's like, it's like they'll glom onto a script because it's like, again, probably the same way this movie, like the location got actors involved. I think producers look at a script that says, oh, it takes place in a bank robbery. Okay, this is great. We can just do everything here in this one location. Or it's a siege, in an armored car or something like that. We'll do everything in that one location. So we're seeing like a lot of these one location movies. They almost always start with some piece of action from the middle. They'll put that at the beginning, and then 2 weeks later, they all follow the same formulas. And so it's like, it's almost like if one of them can be a little bit inspired, but it's like, that's our bar now, is like a little bit inspired is like a decent movie for us now. It's kind of a shame.
Yeah, I mean, what was that? Stallone has been in a couple of these absolute Randall, that was abysmal. And then there was another one that he did. I can't remember. That. I think it might be Alara. Yeah, Alarum. Awful. Yeah. Just wretched movie. As you say, like they'd obviously got some location, some sort of hotel in Bulgaria or something where the sort of most of the action is set, and just so bad. I mean, and I'm only watching it because Stallone's there, and it's sort of like, and I guess I'm allowing the producers there to win there, because they're kind of, I want to be a Stallone completist, so I know that this is going to be wretched, but I still end up watching it. I should boycott. I don't know if, would boycotting make a difference? Who knows? But
right. But there's this sci-fi writer and kind of journalist on technology, Cory Doctorow, who has this concept called enshittification. Essentially, that things like Facebook, they start off really great, and then they become shitty once they've locked you in as a user. And he calls the boycotting concept as hard buying or something like that, or something. This idea of like, you're not going to change Amazon by boycotting. You need regulators to change it. But I don't know. You're right to this point. Like, I mean, you even mentioned Bulgaria. It's like the economy in the United States, especially in the southern states, is so bad that it's actually cheaper to make a movie in Louisiana or New Mexico than it is in Bulgaria, which sounds crazy, right? Like, like we did 211, that was made on the soundstage in Bulgaria that the New Millennium guys have, or the Millennium guys. I keep calling it New Millennium, it's Millennium. But Randall Emmett, he makes his movies in Alabama, Louisiana, New Mexico now is a big place. The economies in those states aren't the best. And so they're like, yeah, please come in with your production and use our area. But it's like, I don't even know how much money those areas, I don't even know how much money they provide for the economies in those areas, because again, they're doing everything on the cheap. So, I mean,
and they'll be doing it for the tax. They'll be doing it because they're like major tax breaks there as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a big piece of it, I think, from especially, in America, they talk about blue states versus red states, but this idea that sort of the red state ones that are run by Republicans, they tend to be more likely to sort of sell out their I don't know what the term you want to use for their population. I was going to say like their plebes or whatever, but like, it's one of the things with so getting into a different, I'll be really quick on it, but like, in England, right, teams don't generally move. It's like, if you're Liverpool and you don't like your stadium situation at Anfield or whatever, you can't just be like, I'm going to move to Manchester and play there, right? Because it's like, well, no, there's, but in America, you can't, teams move all the time. And one of the things that states that are, teams that play in blue states, like for example, the Chicago Bears play in Illinois, which is a Democrat-run state. They're threatening to move to Indiana, which is run by a Republican, because he's going to give them money to build a stadium. Essentially, he'll fund the stadium, and everybody knows that these stadiums don't net their communities any money. They're a money sink. But that's the technique that they're using. Same thing in Missouri, which I think Missouri is actually a red state as well, but they're moving to Kansas because Kansas is going to give them more money. It's a trip, but to your point, like I think these states, they like the prestige of saying, oh, I talk to movies. The governor of Louisiana can say I talk to movie people or whatever. We had these movies made in our state. But yeah, I mean, like for example, how much are they putting into the hotel infrastructure if they're having the crew sleep 4 to a room, right? Like they're not contributing as much to the economy. I mean, how is it working with the food? I mean, I guess they're probably eating out at restaurants, but how much if they're skimping on the budgets?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, we certainly in the UK we certainly give like massive tax breaks to filming here, but I mean we do have like I don't know how many. We do have like some big studios here, and we do have like big like production houses. There are a lot of like kind of visual effects agencies sort of based in London. So incentivizing like, if those people are going to stay and work, you need productions to be made here. So I can kind of understand why they're sort of doing those tax breaks to kind of bring those films here. But you do kind of like wonder, like, does there come a point, like, do the economics actually work for the economy? They certainly benefit the filmmakers, but do they actually benefit, like, us in the UK, or people in a particular state in America? And I haven't looked at the numbers, but I don't know, my suspicions are probably doesn't benefit anybody other than the filmmakers. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a catering standpoint, but like, again, like whether it's in the UK or here in America, like, are the catering companies, are they maybe undercutting each other? So it's like, oh, I'll take a loss on the catering just so I can say that have my company name be in the credits. And it's like, well, who watches the credits? I do, of course. I watch the credits for all the movies, but that's me. I'm like definitely in the low percentages of people that watch the credits.
Well, you're probably giving some crumb of comfort to somebody, some catering company out there who took a massive hit on their bottom line.
Right, Randall Emmett scammed them out of their craft services budget. Yeah, exactly. Because I had heard that, like with Michigan at least, I'd heard that that they did have that they were getting some like a bit of a boost from having films made there. But this was like right around the financial crisis period. So like, 08, 09. And then, I think that was like them and Louisiana were the big ones. And then you had like Alabama, Mississippi, and then, now New Mexico. But I do wonder, now that states are competing for that money, how much, they are able to, they might be undercutting each other. And so then it's like the money's not there like it used to be.
Somebody needs to lift the lid on this, on the accountancy here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Well, Will, before we transition into Future Zone, anything on this one? Anything else on South Beach that you wanted to mention?
Well, we obviously are doing this film as part of our sort of Nepo Babies thread of programming, and as we talked about, this film did feature Peter Fonda. He does at some point sport a very fake moustache in this film. I just wanted to make a couple of other points on Peter Fonda before we go here. I don't know what you thought of his look in this film, because he has this slicked back hair and he has this moustache, and it kind of looked to me, I mean, it's a horrible look. He kind of looks like a sort of a seedy porn director. For my money. It was a horrible look. And I actually think that some scenes he's okay in, but there's one scene, he does this scene with a motel owner, and it's a horrible performance. It just is. I mean, I don't think Peter Fonda is necessarily the world's strongest actor anyway, but I don't know whether he was having a bad day, whether he just wasn't into this film anymore. But it was an awful it was an awful performance in that particular scene. So yeah, Peter Fonda. This is far from the best advert, I think, for his acting or for his hair or facial furniture styling.
Right. Well, because the other thing with that scene, and I wonder if part of the reason why he wasn't happy doing that scene is that was their Fred Williamson's way of shoehorning Frank Pesci into the film, because that's Frank Pesci's one scene is the motel owner. And so I wonder if he was just like I wonder if that scene was even in the movie to begin with, and Williamson, shoehorns it in to get Frank Pesci so he can put his name on the marquee, or not the marquee, but the list of names. So I do wonder if that was part of it. But yeah, to your point about the look, I mean, he should have been either like a shady like bookmaker or, like you said, porn director. He's like the guy that
yes, bookmaker, definitely.
Yes, exactly. Like he wasn't like, he didn't have the look of Williamson or even Gary Busey's character as somebody who's like, like you see Busey with his members only jackets and it's like, okay, I get it. Like I get that he's like a private eye. Peter Fonda's character, he just looked like somebody who's like trying to con somebody or working a hustle, not one of the heroes in the film.
He looks like he would be running a phone sex agency, doesn't he?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I wonder if, again, because that's the character that Fred Williamson throws up against a wall, right? And maybe slaps him around a little bit to get information, and Fonda's like, no, I'm sorry, man. I'll tell you whatever you need to know. And it is weird that he looks that part, but then in the Frank Pesci scene, he's like, if you don't tell me what I need to know, I'm going to shoot this bulletproof glass, which I don't even know how that works. But I have to say, you've probably never experienced that. You've never probably gone to a proprietorship that had bulletproof glass. In England.
Mercifully, never had to deal with that. Yes. But just on the thing of phone sex. Also, I am, I've not an industry I'm terribly familiar with, but I think its depiction here in this film was sort of laughably inaccurate, where the phone sex office is populated by lots of young, incredibly attractive women who seem to be very happy to talk enthusiastically to these, freaks and geeks who phone up wanting a bit of phone sex, which I suspect the reality of that industry, it's largely populated by women of all shapes and sizes, and who are probably very unenthusiastic to be taking their 76th call of the day, listening to somebody, some bloke pleasure themselves on the other end of the phone. But that's not the world of phone sex we get depicted here. And I was that provided me with a little bit of entertainment as I watched this film.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And there's also this whole point of like Vanity's character, Robert Forster keeps telling her, you're too good for this kind of work. There's still like that stigma in the 90s of doing sex work, and phone sex was considered sex work. But yeah, it's almost like, again, phone sex operator, that whole concept would have been big in the erotic thriller world at that time.
Yes.
I remember there was one with Debbie Harry. I can't remember what it was called, but she was a phone sex operator who
Call me.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah.
Surely. I mean, missing a trick if you don't.
Yes. What was it called? Deadly something. Deadly. It was deadly something. Intimate desire. It had nothing to do with phones, actually. I don't think it had anything to do with the word. It was like the whole plug and play, or like the whole movable type of titles for those movies. It was like she was a phone sex operator, and Tim Thomerson. I guess I'm giving it away that Tim Thomerson's the killer. I don't remember if it was an issue that he was the killer, but he she was like getting these phone calls, and then he was killing people while talking to her. That was kind of the thing. And so it was kind of a creepy thing. I remember seeing it on cable when I was growing up. But Intimate Stranger. That's what it was called, Intimate Stranger, which I guess kind of fits, right, with with phone sex. But again, same idea, right? She's very beautiful. I think her friend who was doing it was very beautiful. I remember Aerosmith when they re-released their song "Sweet Emotion" when they put out their greatest hits album. They did a whole phone sex thing, and it's like I think it was it's like this young actor. He's doing the phone sex call, and it's this beautiful woman, right, who's on the other end. Until you get to the end, and you see this like kind of overweight house mom with like curlers in her hair, holding her baby, hanging up the phone. It completely kind of shattering that image.
Well, you know, it's lifting the lid on accountancy and lifting the lid on the reality of phone sex working. We need all these exposés to happen.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's again. I think it's again this. Fred Williamson, when he's making this movie, I think he was just putting pieces together and like, okay, what are things in erotic thrillers? Oh, phone sex. Okay, I guess yeah, he was just adding all these things together and calling it good.
Sometimes that can be enough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So I mean, I don't know if we want to move on to our next film, Future Zone.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so I guess starting with John Carradine, interesting enough, I mentioned that he was in Grapes of Wrath. I also liked him in Stagecoach. Stagecoach, I think, is my favorite Western of all time. I don't know if you had any other particular John Carradines.
Oh God, I'm struggling to think of his filmography. I do know, though, from my Letterboxd stats that I have seen a ridiculous number of John Carradine films. He is one of my most watched actors, and going back to the point we were talking about before, the fact that he was in a lot of classic films. I like to watch films from that sort of golden era of Hollywood from the 30s and 40s. But equally, he had a lengthy career in schlock through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So yeah, I've strangely have clocked up an awful lot of Carradines over the time. I would need to. Yeah, I can't think of.
Because I think what it is with him is he plays small roles in a lot of big films. So he's in, he's again, I mentioned Stagecoach, which I mean that's kind of an ensemble piece, but that's like a lot of names in that one. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. That's you probably don't think of him as that one. And I mentioned Grapes of Wrath, right? We think of Henry Fonda for that movie. I wonder if that's part of it. Is that he's just and like for your point, like you've seen a lot of stuff with him in it. That's probably part of what it is.
Yeah, because I've sort of, as you can get the impression here, I've seen a lot of his films, but I'm struggling to kind of recall what on earth those films are, because he just is. Yeah, I don't know. He's like a card sharp or something in some particular film. But I'm just having a look at his filmography here. I think that was a good, it's a good film noir that he did called Fallen Angel. I don't think he has a particular. He's not the lead in that. It's a Dana Andrews film. And he's in Johnny Guitar, which is a western that I really like. But again, he's has a kind of small background role in that particular film. So he's kind of sort of very much I mean, I'm sure he's done some leading performances, but he's very much sort of like that second or third lead, wouldn't he, in a lot of his films?
Yeah, and it's very weird. Like, again, we talked about how Henry Fonda was kind of just doing, kind of higher end stuff for a long time. It's fascinating when you look at John Carradine. I mean, we talked about him doing, kind of schlock or low budget movies, but even when you look at like, the 40s, I mean, he does Grapes of Wrath in 1940. You think that would be like, okay, well, you're in Grapes of Wrath, you're going to get a whole bunch of, but then it's like a whole bunch of, low budget Westerns from that time, horror movies, just, all kinds of different things. It's a movie called Hitler's Mad Men, which I can't imagine what that's like. Revenge of the Zombies. Like these are movies that like, I mean, again, I don't think Henry Fonda would be anywhere near Revenge of the Zombies in 1943, but John Carradine's like, sure, let me do that one. So I mean, I'm seeing Invisible Man's Revenge. I mean, or The Mummy's Ghost. Like
these would be the days of contract players, wouldn't they? So I don't know how much choice he was actually getting. He'd show up at the studio and they'd say, okay, yeah, you're on Hitler's Henchman today. Go over to the Studio 3, get your costume on.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the point, because like I guess I like Humphrey Bogart was in that kind of situation, and he would complain, right? Like why are you still making me do like the Return of Dr. X? Like I should be, I've been making you a
Mm.
lot of money doing these other movies. And I guess there was that point where that breaks, and it's interesting, like when that breaks, when that like you said, like the contract system breaks and people get more choice, that John Carradine kind of liked it. He kind of liked doing these low budget movies. And I guess, whereas like people like Henry Fonda were like, oh, now that I get to choose more, I'm going to pick different roles.
Well, how much choice was it? I mean, I think Henry Fonda probably was a bigger name, and so
Yeah.
he could afford to be selective about the films that he was doing. Whereas I kind of get the impression that nobody was going to be giving John Carradine. He'd be doing kind of smallish parts, not a bigger name. So I guess he had to just sort of reconcile himself to the reality of the work that was going to be offered to him.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because it is interesting. Sort of, think of some of these character actors that we have today. Like someone like David Morse, for example, who like,
Mm.
I mean, how many movies did he do in the '90s? And kind of, but I think my wife was saying that her sister went to school with his daughter here, so maybe he's from this
Oh,
Pennsylvania
okay.
area. Yeah, but you think of a David Morse, where I mean, I get a sense that he was probably choosing projects too, where he was like, okay, I'm not the star, but like, yeah, I'll do The Rock. That sounds like a lot of fun. Um, and he probably got paid pretty well. I mean, I know John C. McGinley's another one that he talked about that before he got Scrubs and was on regular TV. I remember him being featured on one of the entertainment shows, and made a pretty good life for himself. But I think also too, it's like, okay, people need me for these certain parts. Like they need to fill out their movies with these parts, and it's better to get a David Morse than somebody that nobody's ever heard of before. And so, yeah, I guess whereas like to your point about John Carradine, I mean, I wonder how I would compare him with a David Morse, like because on some levels, I almost feel like John Carradine was better, than David Morse.
Yeah.
But it feels like David Morse had more of a say in what movies he was taking.
I would say, well, I'm sure David Morse definitely did, because he's not working in that era of that contract era. So yeah, I think he would definitely be having more of a say. I think John Carradine, though, I think he is. I don't know if I would say he's a better actor, but like John Carradine is such a distinctive looking person that you would be wanting. If you're going to cast him in as a part in your film, maybe it's just a smallish role as a saloon bar owner, or maybe he's some sort of crook who runs somewhere that shifts stolen jewelry or something. He's got that. He's so tall, he's so thin, he's got that very sort of gaunt, distinctive face, obviously that kind of a look that worked so well in so many of the horror movies that he ended up sort of making in the 70s and 80s. So he's you can see why he remained in work and in employment, because he did have a bit of a name, but he also just had that very distinctive look, and it had also a very distinctive and almost kind of like regal way of talking as well. So he had particular kind of flavors that he would be distinctive flavors that he'd be bringing into the film. Whereas David Morse feels to me more like somebody who, like John Carradine is always kind of John Carradine, whereas David Morse, I feel he's got the ability, or maybe it's frankly maybe just the physical looks, to almost sort of take on the role that you want him to be in a particular film. So he kind of sort of in some ways disappears into the role or the part that he's playing, in a way in which John Carradine, I kind of think you're always going to see him on screen and you think that's John Carradine.
No, that's a great point, because I think like David Morse fills out your big budget production. Right? He fills in parts that you need in something like The Rock, where you've got a bunch of characters. Whereas John Carradine is perfect in a low budget production because his characters don't require a lot of exposition or character.
Because he's going to add color, isn't he? In a way in which David Morse is not going to. David Morse is going to add reliability, credibility. Like he's somebody you're going to get a decent performance out of in this kind of like, yeah, in the kind of, as you're rounding out your cast, somebody who can actually hold their own in a scene with like your big name actors in that particular film. Whereas, yeah, John Carradine, you're kind of casting him to probably add a bit of color to kind of a few scenes that you're doing.
Yeah, and again, he doesn't, you don't have to explain who he is, right? We know, okay, he's the creepy innkeeper or whatever, right? It's like, it's obvious. Whereas David Boris, you don't know what he's about unless, the movie has to, like you said, it's got to, the movie's got to color him as opposed to John Carradine can color the movie.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you've very succinctly put.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Now, the movie we're about to talk about here, Future Zone, this is an AIP production, but it features director David A. Pryor, who also wrote the movie, and producer David Winters. Now, of course, you and I are both familiar with David Pryor and David Winters from your podcast, where we talked about Dancing It's On, which was David Winters' last film, but also was written by Pryor.
Yes, a very, very strange film on so many levels.
Yes. It is funny. I see, like, from time to time people covering it. And granted, I needed to do it because it was Gary Daniels, so he's another one that I've got to do. All his movies. I'll be getting into some Christian movies that he's done as well because they're Gary Daniels. Where for you, it had an exploding helicopter in it, so that's why it was necessary for you to cover it.
It did indeed, in a kind of a very strange exploding helicopter, included in a musical set in some sort of Miami hotel. Right. So they crop up in the strangest of places.
They do. And so people should definitely check that one out in your archives. That Dancing It's On, because that was, I remember, we were talking about what we were going to cover on your podcast, coming up, and you were kind of like, I don't know if anybody else would do Dancing It's On, and it's not like, yes.
Well, I'd seen that you'd watched it because you were ticking off your Gary Daniels, and I had recently watched it, and I just thought, I've got to take, the stars are aligned here. I've got to take advantage because I don't know who the hell else I'm going to be able to get to watch this film. So let's just take advantage of the fact that you've just watched it and get it covered off on the podcast that way.
Yeah, it is a fascinating movie. So people, at the very least, I don't think it's going to spoil anything if you listen to the podcast, because they're really, if you can imagine what Dancing It's On is, I mean, it's supposed to be kind of like a ish Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a fascinating one. But David A. Pryor, who wrote and directed this movie with worked with AIP Pictures. David Winters was a producer for them, and so he did direct some of their movies as well. But when AIP starts in the 80s, they're kind of like a notch below Canon. And and a notch below PM Entertainment, who comes in around the late 80s as well. And I think this movie is definitely a telltale sign of that their budgets were not what PM's budget would have been.
I totally agree. There's plenty of evidence for a film set in the future. There is the absolute minimum of set dressing to imply that this film is in the future. I mean, if you kind of sort of looked away in a few scenes, you'd think that this film was set in the present day.
Right. Well, because one of the funny things for AIP, with their budgets being lower, now also we're talking about low budget states to shoot in. This was shot in Mobile, Alabama, which at that time it's still there's kind of I don't know how to explain it. Like at that time, you still could shoot in LA for a good price. So I'm not sure what made them decide to shoot in Mobile, Alabama. David Winters was also known for shooting in South Africa, which would have still been apartheid South Africa at that time. And so it's always interesting when you watch movies like Space Mutiny that David Winters does in South Africa, because there's only white people in the movies. And it's like, that's South Africa, huh? It's only, it's just very, again, just kind of knowing what South Africa was at that time. It's always a fascinating thing. It's, again, talking about like supporting movies. I think at this point it's so long past that point that but at the time you didn't realize that you were, I don't know if we would have been supporting apartheid by watching one of those movies, but definitely, he was definitely taking advantage of certain, aspects of South Africa at that time to make his movies on the cheap, which is, David Winters, I guess. But this one wasn't made in those kind of environments. It was made here in Alabama. But Well, but you know, again, you know, now it's sort of like the pendulum has swung back, where now it's actually cheaper to make your movie in Alabama than it is in even in Bulgaria, unless you're, you know, you're already set in Bulgaria and you're just going to use a bunch of actors from England. So it's kind of fascinating. This movie was made in the late '80s, but now it's a trend that's happening again, that movies are made there.
Well, Trump wanted to bring American film production back into America, and seems to have achieved it by enshitifying enough states that it now makes economic sense to shoot films once again in America.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Alabama has probably. I've never been to Alabama before. Full disclosure, Mobile is actually a state I'd like to go to because there's a train that recently opened, which is just kind of crazy for America that they've opened a train through 3 red states as well. But it goes like Mobile, Biloxi, and then New Orleans, and it seems like it would be kind of a fun vacation. I don't know how you get to Mobile from here. I don't think there's any flights that fly into Mobile, so I don't know if I'd have to go to New Orleans and then go across and then go back to New Orleans and fly home. But it does seem like a nice visit. But yes, Alabama, in terms of American states, I think either it or Mississippi have had the distinction of being the most enshittified, for decades, long before Cory Doctorow came up with the term. Those states have been. I think a friend of mine said he was there. This was in like the 2000s. He was there for something for work, and he got sick and had to go to the hospital, or one of his coworkers did something like that, and they were still using the clipboard or whatever that the clipboard hanging from the bed for like patients' information, as opposed to having it computerized at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, now I have to assume that it's done on computers now, but he said it was like like watching an old episode of MASH or something like that. Like, the doctor comes in and pulls the clipboard up.
I'd be like, you know what? It's really not that bad. I can probably check out now.
Right, exactly.
Try and find some medical care elsewhere.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've never been to Alabama. So I at some point I want to go to all the 50 states. So I do at some point want to go. It's funny talking with my wife about that because she has no desire to go to all 50 states, and so it's like the idea of just going to Alabama just to go to say I've been to that state to her would be anathema. But for me, it's like at some point I want to like step foot in Alabama and say I was there. But yeah, I mean, this I think Matlock was filmed there. I think it took place in Georgia, but I think it may have been filmed. I'm not sure. Just sort of again talking about Alabama there, but yeah, this movie. One of the things with the budget, when you talked about the fact that it doesn't exist in any kind of time, the cars. You think of like a PM movie or a Cannon film or even like an Andy Sidaris movie where they would have modern cars and then they would find old junkers that they would make look like modern cars that they could blow up. Or you just, you would happen to see like an old boat of a car from the 70s in a PM film and you're like, okay, that's the car that's going to flip, right? That's the one that they're going to crash. But the new cars are the ones that are kind of weaving in and out of that, but they don't get damaged. In this movie, they were like, no, we can't even afford new cars as pace cars or anything like that. It's just all old cars.
Yep, it's definitely it's definitely low budget. It's definitely a low budget film, and that's for sure. And I mean, it's meant to be set at some point in the future, and you kind of got this idea that there's been some sort of breakdown in law and order. So you have the kind of the concept of the film here is you have areas of the country which are policed by cops, which is an acronym for was it civilian operated police or something
I
like
believe
something,
that's it. Yeah,
something like that. And in terms of the kind of creating the look of this world, all of these like inverted commas cops seem to wear a lot of denim for unknown reasons. And I mean, if it weren't for the video calls that happen between like the kind of video calling facility they have in the vehicles and the head office, that's literally and these denim uniforms, that's the only sort of evidence that we're in the future in this film, which is I think speaks to the fact that this is a low budget film, because that was as far as they could make the budget stretch in creating this sort of near future timeline.
No, that's a great point. That was really it, was the talking on the video calls. And it was interesting too, because apparently like you didn't like ring somebody up. You just like just picked up the receiver, or you just like pushed a button. You're like, okay, I'm talking to somebody. I mean, 'cause, like, there's one scene where David Carradine's character. So maybe I'll give a quick synopsis of what the movie's about, because this one we actually do have a coherent story, at least, compared to the other movie. Basic idea is, in the future, again, like you said, policing has been outsourced to a private company. Carradine's the best of these cops, but then some guy just shows up, played by Ted Pryor. We don't know who he is. He comes in a flash of light, a la the Terminator. It looks very similar to the Terminator, the way he comes up. But we don't know who this mysterious character is, but he seems to know a lot about David Carradine. And he has a real interest in wanting to make sure David Carradine solves a crime, but is safe while he's solving it. And so they're trying to solve this crime that involves, drug dealers, murderers, and things like that. At the same time, Charles Napier is running the police department, and he's on the take. And so he's sort of going behind Carradine and either setting him up or stealing evidence or things like that. And so, once Carradine starts to figure out what's going on, it's a kind of a final showdown with the baddies, and it's, who wins, essentially, is kind of how it works. We're setting drugs on fire and all these kind of shootouts. So that's kind of the extent of it. But yeah, I mean, Will, what were your thoughts on this movie? How did you feel about this one?
Oh, well, I mean, this was like a long, cool drink after the sort of the long march through the desert that was watching South Beach. Because, as you say, we have, for whatever flaws this film may have, you do actually have a coherent story, which I always appreciate in a movie. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of, in many ways, I feel like sort of typical AIP type of product. You've got a sort of, kind of like genre film here, given a little bit of a futuristic styling, and then you've got some, you've got like a name, inverted commas, name actor in the shape of David Carradine. It's nothing you haven't seen a million times before. It's nothing that you haven't seen done a million times better. But it's, it slips down easily enough. It's a watchable movie. I think Carradine, this is far from his best work. I don't know what you thought. I thought he looked very bored throughout this film. I don't think his performance is helped by the fact that there is copious use of ADR here. Some of the action here is very bad. I mean, there's a truly inept shootout in a warehouse, which is, it kind of feels like something from from the like Police Squad, the kind of the way in which the kind of the shots are staged. And obviously in the Police Squad, the joke is they're actually like 3 foot apart from each other. I mean, just, yeah, the sort of the kind of sense of space and the way that was shot was just was pretty terrible. But there's kind of enough sort of low budget goofy charm that I was kind of able, this film just sort of happily washed over me. And not the best, not the worst, very much somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a, think of it like the Italian movies that were made at this time, like the post-apocalyptic Italian movies, where those movies had a little bit more than this movie did, but like the little bit more would have made it like kind of a fun, goofy romp. Whereas this movie, it doesn't have enough to be like a fun, goofy romp. But like you said, compared to South Beach, you can at least sit there and go, okay, I know where this thing is going. There might be some twists and turns here and there, but for the most part, I get it. I'm in and out in 80 minutes. And, to your point, even when there's bad action, at least it's, I don't know. South Beach is a good point. South Beach, people were shooting at each other all over the place. Like it was nothing. It was just like in the middle of the street. At least in this movie, when people were shooting at each other, it made sense. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, somebody's coming out of a hotel. Let me shoot him. That was happening. I kind of forgot about that part about South Beach, that people were just like shooting at each other, indiscriminately.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are things within this film which I just thought, well, like, they sort of have an idea here, but it doesn't seem like they've actually thought it through terribly, or kind of maybe gone as far as they could with it. So we have within this film the kind of concept that time travel exists, and I think you've already mentioned it. It's have you already done the spoiler here, the big spoiler for this film? Are you bothered about spoilers?
Oh no, we're so no, we
Okay,
can, yeah,
fine.
for sure.
So we've got David Carradine's kind of like son coming back from the future, but it's like there's no real important reason for that to happen, is there? Like it's not as if he's come back from the future because it will have terrible consequences for the world of whenever he's come back from if David Carradine doesn't sort of survive to the end of this movie. The only reason he comes back is he says, "Oh, I'm just here to test it," and I thought I'd come back to this time, and it's like, well, you got that. Is that the extent of the kind of, is that all you want to do with the idea that time travel exists, and how you play this into the movie? I mean, I guess you could have had the idea, I maybe like in the future Charles Napier's character, because he gets away with this stuff, does something awful, and so he's got to cut back in time. This is the moment. If you're going to stop him at any moment, this is the moment. But no, film doesn't do anything like that whatsoever. And I just thought that was a bit sort of that whole idea was just sort of burned through or thrown away, like in a very casual way, and will seem to me to be an opportunity to kind of do something a little bit, create a little bit more sort of up the stakes in this movie.
Well, because the idea is supposed to be that because Carradine dies after his, the wife character, who's played by his real life wife at that time, just pull up her name here, Gail Jensen. So the idea is, I guess, that because Carradine dies after Gail Jensen's pregnant with Ted Pryor, he grows up without a father, I guess is supposed to be the idea, and that he's coming back to save his dad, so he grows up with a dad. Now, based on how Carradine's character is in the movie, where he's constantly ditching Gail Jensen's character to go on jobs, I mean,
how present is he going to be as a father, even if he lives? Yeah,
right, exactly. Like it's going to be one of those things like, oh, my Little League game's today. Okay, son, I'll go to your Little League game. Then suddenly, Renee Klein's character calls up, and hey, John, I got a great tip on a thing here. Oh, sorry, kid, I can't go to your Little League game. I got to go, bust these, because that's what he's doing. I mean, there's this point where Gail Jensen is going to tell him she's pregnant. And she's going through this process of putting on, lingerie and everything to kind of make herself up for him. She's got like a little booty that she's knitted, and she's going to tell him. And while she's, doing that, he's sitting on the couch having a drink. And Renee Klein, so Renee Klein is she's an actor who's been in a lot of these AIP movies, and so she's, calls him up and says, "Hey, John, I got a sweet tip on these guys. You should go check them out. They're only going to be there for a short period of time." And he's just like, in the middle of her getting ready, he hits the road, like he just disappears. He just leaves, and she's like, on the front stoop or on the porch, telling him like, what's going on. So yeah, I it's almost one of those things like there should have been a part 3 where it's almost like, be careful what you wish for.
Definitely, and it kind of, it just, I mean, it's the sort of thing you kind of come to expect from AIP. So it didn't ultimately prevent myself from enjoying, kind of, I think maybe I was on such a euphoric high after South Beach that I would say that I enjoyed Future Zone. But
no, what's funny is I watched them in the opposite order. So I watched Future Zone first. So I think I picked up the flaws more. I wonder, because it's like one of the big flaws in this movie for me was the fact that Carradine's character never actually gets out of a situation, right? So it's like, like there's that sequence where he's ambushed, where he's in this trap, and all of these guys have guns trained on him. And I think it was when you were talking about this kind of, sort of police squad-esque. Yeah. And it's like, all these guys have these guns trained on him. And it's like, how is he going to get out of this? Well, he just starts shooting and he ducks behind something. It's like, but there were impossible odds that he couldn't get out of, but he just, jumps away. Later in the movie, there's a sniper that's, when they're doing the big handoff of the gun of the drugs and everything, there's a sniper who's targeting them. And there's like kind of this impossible odd, like, what are you going to do? How do you defeat the sniper? They just sort of run around or whatever, and it ends up not being an issue. And so, like, there were those plot holes that I can kind of see that when you experience those plot holes the way I did as the first movie, compared to when you experience those plot holes after the 90-minute plot hole or variety of plot holes that was South Beach. I mean, it's almost like expecting the city to come and fill in potholes. It's like the way that the plot holes are in South Beach. I can kind of see how you'd forgive those even more because they aren't anywhere near as bad as what you get in South Beach.
No, they're really not, and you can kind of you can just let those sort of skate over you without kind of really hindering your kind of enjoyment or otherwise of this film.
Now, interesting, we had Charles Napier, like you mentioned in this, and it's funny because his character usually is more in command or more in control. This was kind of like his Rambo, First Blood Part 2 character, the way he's treated.
Yeah, I mean, normally he's as you say, normally he's fully in command here, but the whole situation seems to be sort of slipping through his fingers here.
Yeah, and he has that moment where he's getting beaten up by David Carradine's character. He's getting threatened by the baddie, and all that stuff. And it's like, boy, that's not the Napier that we've grown to know. But it kind of makes sense if you were, if somebody had watched Rambo and they, First Blood Part 2, and they were like, oh, this is the Napier we want. He fits perfectly in that mold.
Is this the Napier we want though? Like. Who knows?
No, that's a good point. Like, it's one thing when it's John Rambo, when it's Rambo, like stabbing, the knife next to him, but letting him live. It's like in that circumstance, you're kind of like, okay, I get it there. But yeah, in this movie, I don't know if that's the Napier I want, or the Napes that I want. Yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, it's not the Napes. Not the Napes we want.
No, exactly. Now I mentioned Renee Klein in this, and I just want to quick mention her because she was in a movie called Invasion Force that I covered on a previous podcast episode with Chris the Brain from Bulletproof, and she had a much bigger role in that film. But she is kind of one of those parts that, like AIP, they had her, they had like William Zipp was another one. Obviously, Ted Pryor, who was in this, who's David Pryor's younger brother. They had this stable of actors that could come in and sort of fill out these parts and kind of give you a little something that, like I think again nowadays we don't always have these kind of actors that do these kind of roles that kind of just flesh out the movie a little bit more and make it work a little bit more.
Who is she in this film?
So she's the woman who's giving him all the tips. She's Cindy.
Yeah. No, she kind of had a bit of, a bit of, as we were talking about earlier about John Carradine. She adds a bit of color to the film, and she's got a bit of personality, and sort of gives a bit of oomph to a character who's just on a video screen, kind of doling out, sort of like, okay, this is essentially all she's there to do is direct David Carradine to his next scene, isn't she? Really, but she kind of manages to kind of do that in a way which I don't know. You kind of like almost look forward to those little interactions.
Yeah, and I think it's something again. We're comparing a movie like this, which again, I think this is kind of one of the sad parts, is that a movie like this that's just a fun time in 1990, it's almost like a modern movie, a movie that's made in the 2020s that is, made on a similar budget with a similar cast. I feel like we would have to forgive so much more to say we enjoyed it. It feels like a lot of modern movies, I'm forgiving all kinds of things and saying, it's not so bad. We don't even get a lot of these kind of movies anymore. Forget like, some of the really great ones from this time period.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what point you're making there.
Yeah, so like the thing about like the Randall Emmett movies or the modern direct-to-video movies, it's hard to even get a Future Zone quality movie out of those movies.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the economics of the film industry, but yeah, it just seems the kind of quality controls just kind of gone completely out of the window, and that there is no like, you could just. I think it's probably the fact the age of streaming just means that there is no sort of bottom end now, whereas I think there probably was like a financial sort of bottom end, because if you had to get your film into video stores, or into kind of like drive-ins, there was a financial cost attached to actually producing enough, videotapes and then being able to ship them out to the stores. There was a kind of financial cost to that. So, the things would actually have to have some sort of, a kind of like sort of a kind of like a financial sort of bottom line that they would have to hit, and then obviously you've got to make the whole thing. Whereas sort of now in this age of digital streaming, it's where things can just be sort of pumped out from a server. It just means that kind of bottom end of the budget is just so low now, and with a commensurate drop in the kind of minimum qualities.
Yeah, and then I think even just like a Renee Klein, who played that again, the character who was like uh, getting John all of his jobs and then paying him when he brings people in. Who again, she did a few movies. In Invasion Force One, she did the most. But she was in a few other AIP films. But we just don't even see like someone like her in a movie like that today. It's like like Randall Emmett when he was making when he was married to Lala Kent, who was a reality star. It's like, okay, I'm going to put her in my movies, and she would play like a sheriff's deputy or something, and it just was so obviously a reality star trying to. Not even like really trying to be a sheriff's deputy. She's just there in the movie. There were a lot of those kinds of roles in these movies. Now, I mean, you see an actor here or there, like one that we see a lot is his name's Texas Battle, who kind of shows up in these movies. But for the most part, it's like, yeah, let's just see who we can get in these movies and just put them in these parts and let them do things. And so I don't even know who would have played her part in a modern version of this, but I don't think it would have been anybody that would have given the kind of weight, because either it would have been a big name who was mailing it in, or it would have been somebody that like was a friend of somebody's that they just like, okay, just have them play the part. And so you miss those little coloring moments that a movie like this needs to kind of punch above its weight.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I don't know. But I was trying to think if there's anything else in this. I mean, again, you've got Ted Pryor from Deadly Prey who plays the son, and I mean he's an interesting character because he's he just kind of comes and goes in the film, and he drops these little nuggets about letting us know that he's the son. But again, he's another one of those AIP people that like again, it's his brother making the movies, and it's like, yeah, he's kind of committed to making the movie well. He wants to do as good a job as possible, which again kind of helps the movie. But it is kind of an interesting duality to have him in the movie as well.
Well, he does add like some much needed oomph, I think, to this film, because sort of David Carradine is, I don't know, he's for me, he's sort of going through the motions a bit in this particular film, and he seems in a. Part of it seems, I think, I mean, he seems to be in quite a bad mood. He seems to be quite crabby. Now, I think some of that comes from the character that he's meant to be playing, but I think some of it was like, I'm not sure this is about him portraying character. I think he's just genuinely in a kind of like wishing he was somewhere else today, rather than on this film set. So, fortunately, Ted Pryor is not. He actually is seems to be happy to be involved in making this film and add some much needed kind of energy to the kind of the double act that he forms with David Carradine in this particular film.
No, yeah, that's a great point, because it kind of brings up something that we see with the Seagal movies, especially when Keone Waxman was directing. I think he did like 10 movies with Seagal, and he would always cast another actor, whether it's like a Byron Mann, Bren Foster, etc., to do the heavy lifting in the movie, because obviously Seagal wasn't going to do it, And so again, I wonder if some of these techniques that we see here, like, okay, David Pryor knows his brother is going to show up and do the job. So it's like, we got the big name in Carradine, but if he's going to mail it in, my brother is there to really deliver the performance that sort of carries this thing over the goalpost. I do wonder how much these techniques carry over. I mean, I don't know if Keone Waxman was a fan of AIP and was like, hey, I should do the same thing with that David Pryor did, or it kind of was like a polygenesis thing where it came to him as well. But it is kind of funny to see some of these mitigation techniques that are used in early in the 90s pop up again in the 2000s.
Yeah, who's? I mean, obviously Seagal has stopped working. Obviously, Bruce Willis is retired. Who currently working is in the sort of the sort of like mail it in phase of their career, where they're the name they're the lead name on the cover, but their enthusiasm for actually being there is non-existent.
Boy, that's an interesting question. I mean, so Dolph, when he's not directing the movie, seems to be that.
Okay.
It seems like a lot of Dolph movies where he's if when he's directing it, it's one thing. He turns in the performance that you want. But it seems like if he's just there to get his paycheck, he just kind of does his thing. I mean, though I will say Dolph's ability to mail it in is a lot better than a lot of. So I should say that's not maybe the same thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think who else along the Seagal lines. When you see them in a movie and you're just like, okay, they're just there to kind of do their thing, get in and get out.
What would be an example of a kind of like Dolph's worst postal film performance?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, boy, and that's a good question to think about it, like whether it's him or the movie itself. I mean, he did this movie called Section 8 recently.
Oh, I've seen that. Scott Adkins, isn't it?
Scott, right? They both have really small parts in it, and it's hard to know like how much.
I don't even remember Dolph in that. Jeez.
Right. It's a very small part. It's like, is it Dolph or is it the movie? Another one that he did along those lines was The Best Man. That was one that he did with Luke Wilson. I think Luke Wilson was more mailing it in than Dolph was, but Dolph was playing a drunk character. So
yeah.
I don't know, if that was like his, the thing that he found for himself to be in the movie. And then, the fourth Expendables movie, I think he was recovering from cancer at that time.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of mitigates that part. But
yeah, give him a pass. We'll give him a pass on that one.
Yeah. So I don't know how much it's him versus the movie itself, where it's like, okay, I'm in this movie Section 8. I just wear a tuxedo for half the film and show up here or there, or not even half half of my scenes. I'm in a tuxedo. It's like, okay, this is what you want me to do. I'm going to come in and bang out my scenes and get out of there. That might be
some of these films you hear about, like it was shot in 20 days, and it's just like, well, okay, what are you? How much of it is him mailing it in, or how much is the fact that, like, we've had no rehearsal, we've had like the briefest of walkthroughs on the scene, and we've got to wrap this thing in 90 minutes. We've got to wrap this scene in 90 minutes because we've got like 6 other setups we've got to do today, and they're just moving at, they're unrehearsed, moving so quick that there's no time to actually, I mean that'd be there's some actors who can kind of still produce a performance within that, but let's be honest, Dolph, as much as we love him, he's not a trained actor, is he?
No. And to your point, I think too that I wonder for him, and maybe this is Carradine as well, but I wonder for him, it's like when he gets on the set and he sees what it's all about, maybe that's just what he does. It's like, okay, I know what I'm into here. I'm going to give the performance that fits it. Versus, okay, I'm making this movie, I'm going to put in some more. So that could be too. I didn't think of that. Now another name that Ty and I, when we were on the Skids series, we had Malky on the Skids, John Malkovich. I mean, he's what we were joking that, like, you could see him in his scenes, like mentally, installing a kitchen island with the money he's making from the movies, like a big pizza oven in the backyard. So he's one.
Yeah, he's very happy to pick up a paycheck, and he's been doing that. I've seen some things in where he just sort of crops up for one or two scenes, and you just he's probably learned the lines like literally sort of half an hour before he's wandered onto the set to shoot the scenes. I can't remember. There's some sort of action sort of nonsense he was in where he sort of, I know he's like the big bad and just sort of crops up at the end, and I was just like, it was such a sort of pedestrian performance from him. And I mean, I guess he also you really know when he's on the Skids, because he can be such a sort of flamboyant, idiosyncratic, eccentric actor that when he you kind of really know when he's not engaged in the performance, because you've seen him on these other occasions and he's so mesmeric and he's so larger than life that when he's not engaged in a product, it's very, very, so much more noticeable than it would be if I don't know, some other, I don't know, I mean, well, it is kind of obvious. It is obvious when Steven Seagal is checked out of the movie, but even Seagal at his most checked in, he was like, it wasn't a huge difference between checked in Seagal and checked out.
Right. The big difference between checked in and checked out Seagal is how much he's standing. Right. It's like the more checked out, the more sitting. That's really what the difference is for him.
Indeed, and the kind of the more sort of reverse shots we see of his stunt double or his stand-in, that's when we know, okay,
yeah, exactly.
He's checked out on this one.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just one other name that I can think of is John Cusack, and one of the interesting things with him is, looking at his Twitter when he was posting on Twitter a lot. I think he probably still does. I'm not on there as much, but there was a resentment on his part that like he kind of aged out from like the leading man roles, especially in rom-coms. And he would talk about that. He would talk about how he, Hollywood wasn't giving him those roles anymore, and he moved on. So like when he does these mail-in DTV parts, there's almost a level of a tinge of resentment that colors the mail-in that's interesting.
Well, I find that interesting and strange, because John Cusack strikes me as an intelligent person, and so you would think that he would be aware enough to realize I've got a shelf life as a romantic lead, and after that, like, people aren't gonna, it's not until you do something, not until you start doing something Cocoon, where you can sort of like maybe do some sort of heartwarming sort of older pensioners having a romance type thing. He's gonna have a period of 20 years in between, like, where like no one's going to be interested in him as a sort of romantic focus of someone's romantic attentions. But yeah, I find it interesting that he's kind of not a little bit more sort of philosophical, and not about the kind of roles that he can get at different stages of his life.
Yeah, that's a great point, because Matthew McConaughey did that, where he got out of the rom-coms before his shelf life was up. And I think I don't know if he fired his agent, or because like his agent was not happy with the fact that he was turning down all of these rom-com scripts, but he was like, no, I'm pivoting my career now. I'm going to start making, and he ends up winning an Oscar for it. He ends up getting, shows like True Detective and things like that. But it is interesting that, like, John Cusack thought that the well was going to be, full forever, whereas McConaughey, while the well was still full, where he was getting, $10 million offers for pictures, said, I'm gonna pivot here. Now, granted, he's now got a $10 million deal with Salesforce to do their advertising, and he was doing, Lincoln Mercury advertisements as well. So I guess maybe there's that difference. But to your point, McConaughey saw earlier that when this well was going to go dry, and he pivoted sooner.
Yeah, and I feel like John Cusack had more. It wasn't like the sort of romantic comedies were the only things that he did. I feel like he had more strings to his bow, like at that earlier point in the career. So you sort of think, well, okay, I'm now sort of in my late 40s. I can't do the kind of like the rom-com thing anymore, but I can kind of keep going with these like dramas, with these thrillers or whatever. But I find interesting that he harbors that resentment. But so I like the fact that he sort of he brings that into his films, that brings an edge to his performance, of the fact that, I don't really want to. I'm still giving a good performance, but you can still tell I don't really want to be here either.
Right, exactly. I know Ty met him at one of the conventions that they have in Connecticut, and apparently he had the same vibe when he was there. So I guess they asked him, because Ty and I noticed that in some of his direct-to-video movies, he's grilling.
Yes, the Grillmeister.
The Grillmeister, exactly. And I guess they asked him about that. He didn't know what they were. He's kind of scowled at them. It's like,
but I look, I listened to that, and I love the idea that he'd be look, if I'll do it if I can have a scene where I'm grilling.
Right, exactly. I mean, that movie Pursuit, he spends a good chunk of that film where either he's grilling or he's preparing the steaks to be grilled. That's a lot of what the movie is. Yeah.
But I mean, God knows how much. Do you think that he insists, like, when he's kind of like the steaks, he'd like, no, I need a high quality steak? Bring me. I want a wagyu. I want wagyu beef. Nothing but wagyu beef.
It might be because
I can't feel my character unless I'm working with a better cut of meat.
yeah, because I mean, again, I mean, if these movies are made in the South, it's probable that the meat costs less. That they don't have the same expenses that here, like for example, in Philadelphia, we might have. But I mean, the cuts of meat that he's using in Pursuit, they're very thick cuts. That I mean, again, it's hard to tell, how well the marbling is and all of that, but they look high quality. And I mean, yes, probably in the South they cost less than they would cost up here, but they still look like. I mean, I hope they weren't going to waste. That's what I could say. I hope the crew was at least eating them. I hope something was being done with them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know because he's playing with them without gloves on. So I don't know if there's any. Again, the South generally doesn't have the kind of regulations that other parts of the United States have. So there might not be any issues with him, handling the meat with his bare hands and then serving it to people after the fact.
We're gonna have to shoot this in Alabama because I'm gonna want to touch that meat. I'm gonna want to use my bare hands, and
we don't want to waste it.
We don't want to waste it. We're not getting this production shut down over by food hygiene. So it's Alabama or nothing.
Exactly. Well, Wills, we're wrapping up. Anything else on Future Zone that we didn't talk about?
Well, I think I heard you a little bit earlier suggest that Future Zone doesn't have an exploding helicopter in.
No, it does, doesn't it? Right, it does.
It does. Oh, sorry,
he zaps it.
He zaps it with the. We should talk about the super weapon actually before we wrap this up because, one other futuristic touch that this film has is that David Carradine's cop has this futuristic super weapon, this glove that we find out at the very end of the film. He has the ability to kind of summon it with a remote control, where it can just like fly through the air and fit onto his hand, and he can use this glove to shoot lasers at things, and he does blast a helicopter out of the sky using this super weapon at some point. And it's kind of, there seemed to be a little phase in the 80s of kind of sort of like, I know, super gloves as a weapon. Is it Hands of Steel or something, or Hand of Steel, which is another kind of gloved super weapon movie. I was really fascinated by the idea of the remote control that can summon the glove to the hand, because like, why would you even invent that as a feature?
Right. Well, yeah, because it's I don't know, in England, did you have the Power Glove for the Nintendo? Was that
I was never really into games consoles, so
okay.
We may have, we may not have. I don't know.
So in the late 80s, Nintendo released this thing called the Power Glove, and I remember getting it. And essentially the way it worked was you'd set up these like sensors around your TV, and then you could use the glove to maneuver like Mario through the stages. You'd essentially, and it didn't work. It was a flop. I think I remember with me, when I got it, I had to package it all back up so we could return it because it was so bad. It was like, it didn't work. But it feels like, these movies using like this glove here, this weapon here looks a lot like the Power Glove, except it doesn't have like the buttons that the Power Glove had. But otherwise it looks just like it. And I do wonder if people were inspired by the commercials to actually put something like that in the movie, and that's where we got this proliferation of glove devices in movies.
Yeah, because I mean, of all the super weapons, it's I don't know, it doesn't seem to me to be like, if I was walking through some armory, I wouldn't be picking out, I could pick a super weapon. I wouldn't be picking the super glove, that's for sure.
Oh. Well, and they also don't use it a lot in this movie, which
not at all.
Right. Which I kind of wonder if the reason why they don't use it a lot is because from a story standpoint, he could just, like, for example, in that scene where he's stuck, all the guys are surrounding him. Well, if he has the super glove, he could just like emanate electricity throughout the entire place and zap everybody all at once. So I do wonder if they, I don't know if it's a Deus ex machina kind of thing, but I think they were afraid of that happening. So he only uses it at certain points where it's almost like they want it to look cool versus to be a device that can get him out of problems, I guess.
Because why didn't he summon the, when he's penned in that warehouse, why didn't he summon the glove then?
Right.
I mean, it just as you say, I think it's sort of like inconvenient to he would just sail merrily through this film unharmed if if he was going to use this super glove too much. So I think it's a pragmatic decision there, but one that in hindsight doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a selling point too. So, this movie was sponsored in part by Pepsi and Budweiser. So you can see, futuristic movie settings with old Pepsi cans and old Budweiser bottles. But I do wonder if that was part of the selling point was like, hey, David Carradine's going to have this really cool glove and he's going to use it to zap baddies and fight crime in the future. And they thought, hey, that's great. But then when the reality kicked in of like having to do those effects multiple times, they thought,
Yeah.
Let's do it a few times and put the rest of this money towards other parts of the budget so we can get the obligation of having it done. We can, have him on the cover with the electrified hand and all of that. But we don't have to worry about it from a story standpoint. And we don't have to worry about doing the effects too much.
Yeah, because you can imagine what the trailer looks like. You can imagine everything with the glove
Right.
is in the trailer. So you think it's going to be, you're watching some sort of RoboCop type film here, and then you actually watch the finished film, and it's like the glove's barely in the thing, and it's all over the cover, it's all over the trailer, and what you get is I can imagine the trailer of this film probably looks an awful lot more futuristic than the reality of this film, because David Carradine, his home, I mean, it couldn't be more suburban if this film was like set in the 1950s, let alone some sort of near futuristic time.
Right. No, exactly. It's just sort of like, they just pull up in like a dirt road next to his, to his house. It's like a ranch house, which they do blow up. I wonder if they blow up an actual ranch house.
It looked like a sort of model. I don't know what scale of model, but yeah, the walls, the way it blows up, the walls are so, you can see they're so flimsy that
That's
it was obviously a model, but I still enjoyed that scene. It was well done, even though blatant bit of model work, but well enough done that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think you're right. I think the way that it's almost like at some points when it explodes, it looks like little matchsticks almost in a bit, like the way it splinters. Because one of the thoughts I had was that because, again, in this area, it wouldn't have been inconceivable that somebody bought that land and wanted to put a more modern house there and was like, well, we're going to get, topple the house anyway. But I guess on the other hand, it's like, boy, can you really that area wasn't that secluded to blow up a house in. So I guess that's a good point too. It's like when the house explodes, it looks like there's nothing for acres, for miles away. But when you actually see him pull up to the house when they're using it, there's houses on either side. Like you said, it's more suburban when they're actually visiting it.
Yeah, you can see there's a little breaches in continuity, but we're watching a movie, we're watching an AIP movie, so we're grading on the curve. We're making allowances.
Yeah, and again, it's to your point, like the movie's fun enough that it these kind of again, like for me, I'm kind of, especially doing the Antonio Margheriti movies with you, I've become more of a, I don't want to say connoisseur, going back to my saying it, but I don't know if I'm a connoisseur of model work, but I appreciate it more in movies now, especially now with everything being done by computer generated stuff, which I get too. It's safer probably to blow something up with a computer, but it is a little, that craft of making models and blowing them up is something that did add an element to these movies that I appreciate more now.
Oh, definitely. And if you like model work, I mean, it has still get it in stuff. But I did a film on the podcast a little while back, Dante's Peak volcano movie with Pierce Brosnan, and there's some great behind the scenes videos on YouTube about the model work that they did in order to kind of shoot the stuff there. And just is, you salute the craftsmanship that goes into putting those scenes together, for sure.
Yeah, it's a shame because you get it from a financial standpoint that it's, I mean, I don't know what it costs nowadays to get a company to do all the computer generated images compared to hiring somebody to build out the models. But I mean, I think at the very least, there's no supplies involved, right? It's just, somebody putting I mean nowadays these movies, it's not even just the buildings that get blown up using computers. It's like the guns, the bullets, the squibs, all of it is done through CGIs now.
And you know, I was watching the Wrecking Crew, the new Dave Bautista, Jason Momoa film that's on Prime Video, and there's an awful lot of CGI in that film, and I'm still a bit surprised that some of it is not better. I mean, there's quite a lot of back projection in that film where people are just in a car driving along, and you know, clearly they're not on a road. It's all just they're on a soundstage, and the backdrop's been kind of put in, and even something as routine as simple as that, it's just obvious that's you know, they're on a soundstage, and that's back projection, or whatever they, you know, whatever the digital term for it now is. And I'm just sort of surprised that, yeah, that something as basic as that is still not being able to be better done. And you know, I'm not a I just want to see, I just want kind of like good effects. I'm agnostic as to whether they are real, or whether whether it's CGI, or whether it's kind of practical effects. I'm kind of agnostic. I just want the effects to be good. And yeah, there's some of this digital stuff. I'm just a bit surprised that things aren't a bit further along on especially on some of that like basic stuff, like, yeah, just kind of making it, you know, the background in a scene where people are like driving along look believable.
No, I totally agree with you there, because it is, you know, for me, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not like completely anti CGIs. I mean, one area where I prefer them is with animals. You know, I'd much rather have a CGI elephant or tiger or something in a movie than to actually, you know, wrangle an elephant or tiger and make them be on set. So that's an area where I actually prefer it. But I think, to your point, when it's done well, I don't mind it. You know, I don't. You know, if you blow up a car using CGI, I don't mind it if it looks good. You know, compared to actually blowing up a car. And
Mm.
you know, but you're right. If it's like, especially like when, you know, people are driving and, you know, they're in a car, and like, you know, it's like, I don't know how to explain, but it's like, yeah, we should be at a point now where somebody's driving and they're on a set and there's a green screen to the side of the car,
Yeah.
that it can look good enough. It doesn't, you know, I mean, I'm watching the James Bond movies now, you know, and like, you know, both of those, it's like you can definitely tell that it's a projector
Oh
behind
yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like I don't mind it. You know, I'm okay with it because I understand what they're trying to do, but it does feel like in 2025 it shouldn't look like 1960s James Bond movie.
Mm. I totally agree, but you know, just in case people think I'm you know, completely down on CGI. CGI has given me one of the most entertaining things I think I've seen in the last few years, which was a scene in a film which I know that you reviewed recently, Gunner,
Yes.
where CGI gives us sort of 88-year-old Morgan Freeman running during a prison break, which an incredible use of CGI, and I think justifies its entire existence just for that in one incredible scene.
Yes. I mean, that movie, that scene in general, like it was the most innocuous prison break I think I've ever seen, where the main character, one of the Hemsworth brothers, Liam, I believe, right? No, not,
Mm.
is it Liam? Yeah, Liam. I guess he's the oldest, but he just parachutes into a prison, cuts open a fence with some bolt cutters, and then him and, like you said, a CGI Morgan Freeman run to a
Sprint,
helicopter.
sprint.
Yes. Yeah. It's just like, what are we doing? It, again, I think the thing with that movie, again, compared to this one we were just talking about, is that like
Mm.
there's an overall fun in this movie. I mean, granted, this movie is like a good like 20-30 minutes shorter than I think
Yeah.
than that movie was. But yeah, I mean, and even like a mailing it in David Carradine, with David Pryor helping to lift, you know, prop things up, was more compelling than, you know, the third Hemsworth brother, you know, as like mean
Mm.
mugging it through scenes and trying to, you know, be this gruff special forces guy or whatever. It is kind of funny how these movies have all kind of fallen into this one trap of like, former special forces guy's got to like get his family or get something or whatever, and let's get someone like a Morgan Freeman to play a mob boss or something and do whatever we can with that scene and, you know, call it good, and that's the movie.
It's yeah, it is. It's a trap that too many films have fallen into, and ugh. I mean, that's a film that had an exploding helicopter in, which is my excuse for watching it. I don't know what yours was.
We were doing our Morgan Freeman on the skids.
Morgie on the
episode,
skids.
Morgie on the skids. So we did that one in 57 seconds with Josh Hutcherson. So that one doesn't have an exploding helicopter, I don't think. I think it had a plane crash. So there was that, I guess.
I don't have to watch that, thank goodness.
No, I don't think so. No. So yeah, I don't know what I would. I can't remember. I think that one was shorter, at least, than Gunner. So it did have that to it, and but yeah, and the Morgan Freeman in both of those. It's fascinating that Morgan Freeman's another one who he can mail it in, but it's like when you hear him mailing it in, it would be almost like if Jimmy Stewart lived to do direct-to-video movies in the 80s or something, and he mailed it in, but it's Jimmy Stewart mailing it in, so you're okay with it. Morgan Freeman's kind of a similar way, I think.
Yeah, I think he's got enough. A bit like Robert Forster, who's in South Beach, and I think Robert Forster gives a very good performance actually in that film. He actually seems to be giving a performance. And Robert Forster, he's just and I put Morgan Freeman. He's just a pro. I don't think I've ever seen Robert Forster give a bad performance. I've certainly seen him in plenty of bad films, but I've never seen him give a bad performance. And I admire the kind of the skill and the dedication to craft to having a career as long and extensive as him, and to still be to still give a quality performance.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Yeah, I Forster for sure, just such a consummate professional. It was great. I know Tarantino's getting a lot of flack right now, which he probably should for giving Paul Dano a hard time or whatever. But it is kind of funny too, the things we get outraged about too. That it's like like Paul Dano, no, how can you make fun of Matthew Lillard? No, like what are we doing? But at least the fact that he had the foresight to put Robert Forster in scenes with Pam Grier and Jackie Brown. Especially when I don't think Robert De Niro turns in his best performance in Jackie Brown. To see Robert Forster and Pam Grier steal that movie, I thought was just such a fantastic thing.
Oh, they are by far and away the best thing in that film, and I really I'm not a particular Tarantino fan, but Jackie Brown is definitely one of my favorite of his films, and the performances they give, like all their scenes together, are just so great. They're just so enjoyable to watch. Like, great film, great acting by those two guys.
Yeah, I think for me, of all of Tarantino's stuff, their scenes in that movie is that's like my favorite of Tarantino stuff. And I'm kind of like to you, I'm like, I really like Pulp Fiction, but I'm kind of agnostic on Tarantino, like either way. But that stuff, if I was gonna rank his stuff, I would put just that stuff by itself, the Forster, Pam Grier stuff on its own, number one, and then everything else below it.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of stuff in that film that I don't like. Because isn't it Robert De Niro and Samuel Jackson? They're kind of like a double act in that film, aren't they? And I don't particularly care for their parts of the movie. As you say, the Forster Grier stuff is far and away the best stuff in that movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was good. It was good that he got recognized for that. I mean, he didn't win the Oscar for it, but he got nominated. I think it's for someone like that to finally get that recognition. And he's again, he's different from like, say like a Peter Fonda or Mickey Rourke or somebody who like gets a bump and like starts getting better. I think for Forster it was kind of like this moment, kind of where he kind of emerges for a little bit. Everybody gets to see what he's about. I think the other thing was Breaking Bad, where he was on that show, and so many people were big fans of Breaking Bad, and people get to see him in that. Like I know, my wife was a fan of Breaking Bad. I was like, oh, Robert Forster, this is great. That the more people got to experience him in those roles, because not a lot of people were probably going to watch him in South Beach, unfortunately.
No, I wouldn't recommend that they do either.
No, exactly. Well, as we're wrapping up, anything else on Future Zone that we didn't cover?
No, I think we can stick a pin in it.
All right, perfect. Well, before we go, Will, anything that you wanted to plug?
As of the date of this recording, I've got a new episode of the Exploding Helicopter podcast just gone live, where we're reviewing Steven Seagal's Half Past Dead. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Letterboxd, YouTube, Instagram, on Blue Sky. If you search for Exploding Helicopter, you'll find us. And your good self, you've graced many episodes of the Exploding Helicopter podcast. So come check us out.
Excellent. And yeah, I'll put a link to that. Also, put a link to the letterbox list for your explain, because again, I think people should check and see what their number is. And hopefully you're better than me with my 24%. Hopefully, as the year goes on, hopefully we get back. In December of this year, hopefully I've got a much more respectable number.
I'll be checking in, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you again, Will, and thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.